Welcome, everybody. Tonight is January the 11th of 2022 in Dallas, in Texas. This is Dallas Personal Robotics Group Builders Night Virtual. And we'll do our usual thing, just go around the table, talk about projects and questions, things generally related to robots, robot builds, and technology related to that, mostly. A little bit of housekeeping. So I think everyone online knows about it, but if there's someone on the video, we do have one of the regulars has started a Discord that's pretty active, and there's some neat projects on there. Ask someone from the club and we can get you a fresh invite. The other housekeeping is related to the nature of the club. So as a 501c with kind of formal bylaws and the like, we've set a standard that we have to hold ourselves to, and that involves holding an election every 2 years, and holding an election every year, and then the role of president is limited to a 2-year maximum contiguous serving. And I have now met that time. So normally we would have had on the 8th of January a meeting to hold a new election, but we're still scouting around for someone who wants to run and most likely take the role of president. So we don't have that yet. So at the moment, what that means is that I'll continue to just run these meetings, mostly the Tuesday night meetings, I think. But I'm of a mind to propose deferring the January meeting, the election meeting, until we can get a proposed slate of officers and have a proper handover. So then we'll announce the proposed slate of officers. There's probably going to also be at least one change to the bylaws or rules related to setting up a different kind of membership level for those that aren't in Dallas, since we have such a healthy participation from out of the local area in Dallas. And we want to make the rules kind of reflect the interest these days. So we'll have to announce that. Then by the bylaws, we have to give 2 weeks before the formal vote. Then we'll have a formal vote of the membership if we can reach a quorum, which we normally do. And then at that point, we'll move on like we normally do.
Question.
Okay.
On the alternative membership, are you talking about having somebody or having it so that it's just by video, or versus being able to go to the makerspace?
Well, it's that kind of thing where there's a little bit of draft wording circulating around the board a little bit. I've got to clean it up and get it better circulated. But basically, the idea is that I think in the bylaws, I mean, realize the organization's been around since '84, right? And it was formalized some 20 plus years ago, or whenever the 501c was founded. So there's some language in there that like, it's not clear, I think, if the language allows members who are out of Dallas to even run for office. So there's some little squirrely things like that. And then the other part of it relates to like just membership level. So one of the proposals is to have like a new kind of like slightly reduced rate for people not in Dallas, or people that are essentially virtual. And, you know, we have costs to maintain at the makerspace and others. So, you know, if too many people take advantage of that, then we're going to run cash flow negative, and that can't go on forever. So there's a little bit of balancing on the wording, but does that answer your question, Dave?
Yeah, yes, that does.
Okay. So I just want to say that we're working on it, but before we get too wrapped up around specifics and language, we're trying to get some draft stuff circulated. But quite honestly, my time's been spent in the last few weeks just asking folk if they want to serve on the board. So any other thoughts or questions around this? Okay. With that, we have in queue, oh, Doug has something. Your hand's raised. And you're on mute.
Okay. The bylaws allow 2 levels of membership, and that is regular membership and honorary membership. The honorary membership was really meant to cover people's families. For example, when I pay my dues, my wife actually becomes an honorary member. Okay, that's just part of your dues. When Carl's saying a new level of membership, I don't know if we really want to go quite that way. One possibility is we would have memberships. Otherwise, whatever the new, we have 2 dues levels, but we have 1 level of membership. So a person would be a member with all member rights. We wouldn't have to do any bylaw changes for that, but they might pay a slightly reduced rate. And if I'm following Carl's thoughts right now, and I agree with them, it answered Dave's question. No, it wouldn't be a video only. Otherwise, there would be a North Texas area and non-North Texas area. And the video, so it's not like a person would say, well, I just want to be on the video and I don't want to ever involve. We're hoping that if you're in a local area, that you would participate in local events and local volunteer efforts that we have in the local area. So if I'm following, I think that's what Carl was saying. I'm not out speaking, am I, Carl?
Oh, no. I think you've got, and primarily it's been Doug and I talking about this so far, and you can see that just, in the way that we use different words for about the same concept. That's why we need to get it on paper, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think we're on the same page, Doug, and I hope that it represents what we've heard the membership ask for.
Yeah. And like Carl says, we have a certain level of cost that in the past the dues have just barely paid. All right, and that's one thing we have to just, and the club's not in any financial trouble, but the problem is it has been in financial trouble in the past. And so we don't want to ever get there again if we can help it. So the idea is that the dues should at least cover our set expenses. And then the additional funds that we take in, which either through sponsors or donations or whatever, that will, cover the things that we don't have planned, like the food at contests. And it allows us to have pizzas and stuff where, if we didn't, we couldn't do that sort of thing.
Mugs for people that present from Switzerland.
Yeah, right. And there's an intent, if one of the things, every year, if you look at how the president has done, there's been some aspect of the club that's been improved. And there's a lot of ex-presidents sitting here, and they can all think about during their terms, what was the one thing they emphasized and how it grew. And it may not necessarily all grew in their particular term, but at least the thought was forward. So, I think one of the things COVID has shown us is that we can reach out. We probably never would have reached out if it wasn't for COVID. So this is a really fantastic thing that's occurred under Carl's presidency. So, how do we continue to capitalize on that and yet not lose the things that the club has traditionally done well, so it is a real balancing act. So that's all. I'm sorry if I rumbled on a little too long.
I'm very much of the same mind, and it does seem like that there are people who don't get to utilize the makerspace and perhaps shouldn't have to pay, or at least pay as much for our support of it. On the other hand, that's part of who we are, and if we can't do it, we go away. So I don't know what the right mix is there.
Yeah, so that's why we're kind of going where I think we're going to lead to is that, say, people like Murray and Pat and even Ted. I don't see anybody else that fits that number here. They would get a little bit of a break, and ideally we would pick up some people who are on the edge of supporting DPRG, but they don't want to quite go that far. So hopefully that would help. And so
What's CAD?
Canadian dollars.
Yeah, I think for Pat's case is I think it almost works out, and Pat can. So $40 is $50 in Canadian. So it. That's kind of an interesting level of that might be more than we would necessarily want to require from a person, but we probably there'll be proposals, and you'll see when they come out what to do.
And Ed has a question. Does the club earn dollars from YouTube? And I think the answer is no.
No, we do not.
Yeah. We've sort of talked about trying to monetize that, but I think, Doug, you were saying that with the 501c stuff, it gets kind of squirrely on monetizing.
Well, no, I think you could do YouTube. You could probably monetize YouTube and still stay okay. But I don't think it's not kind of in what the club is about. You don't want to be watching a DPRG YouTube video with an advertisement every 5 minutes, do you? I mean,
well, no,
but
even if you wanted to monetize it, they've raised the barrier to entry for monetization.
Yeah, that's true too.
So you have to have X number of subscribers and like 4,000 watch minutes, either a month or a year or some kind of time before you even start that. And I think we've got a great club here, but I don't think we're going to get that without some serious pushing of.
No, we would be easier to get sponsorships from local businesses like Vex or like.
But I agree with you, Doug. That's not what we're about. We're not about pushing a YouTube channel and watching us do things. We're about doing things.
But I would say this though, having spent quite a lot of many months in the last few years on search, and having spun up and run the meetup pages that we've had, I would say that it might not be direct monetizing of YouTube, but I think that if we could get into the practice of working on SEO, and especially on the YouTube videos, I'm quite confident that could actually drive membership.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Carl, the SEO probably sucks donkey balls right now, but there's probably things that could be done. I know you're more of an expert in that than I am.
There's easier things or harder things, but it just takes time, right? And we are a volunteer organization, so
yeah. But like I say, we can get additional funds by sponsors like Mauser. Mauser has sponsored us in the past. Vex has done it in the distant past, but they haven't been a recent sponsor. So, and there's other, we get some money from TI. So there's some different sponsors we can get some additional funds on.
Is Microsoft and Steve still contributing, or?
Steve could, I set up Microsoft and I continue to keep it current. And Steve's not actively contributing, but he can claim some hours of service as treasurer that he could get. It wouldn't be a humongous amount of money, but it would be some. And so, any person here, there's a whole lot of things you can do. Some of them are really small, like my Amazon Smile charity is the DPRG. And, it's something like half of a penny per dollar. So, I mean, it's not a very big thing, but, if everybody's got that set up on Amazon Smile, I bet it'd probably be $10 or $15 per person coming from that, maybe $5 per person, but it's still something. There's
Welcome everyone, DPRG's. Sorry.
yeah. So anyway, there are some other little, very easy to get funds. COVID has hit a lot of our sponsors. You may know that we get an awful lot of robot prizes from Pololu in the past. Pololu had a really hard time in the COVID years. So we haven't actively exercised that potential donorship this year because we don't even know if we're going to meet in May, but we hope we will for our indoor competitions. So, yeah. So,
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we will. I think I know. I'm causing the echo.
How much do plastic bubbles cost? Maybe we could all get a plastic bubble and meet at the, meet in May.
We'll get there, right? I think the Omicron wave is likely to pass soon, and who knows how long it'll be before the viral load in the animals catches up and there's another variant. So
yeah,
whatever.
I'm actually
Deltacron.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty much. I'm pretty confident that we'll be doing at least competitions in person by May. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen.
Seems to be.
Yeah. And
I am sad. I was just going to go to my Smile account and make sure I could attribute to DPRG from whatever I'm doing, because I think it's a great idea. And it tells me my reviewer ranking is 38,422 and 563. So I'm not in the top 1%. I will tell you that now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's all right. The Smile is based on the payments, right? So the more you buy.
Yeah, the more you buy, the more you get. And like I say, it's really tiny little bit, but if everybody was doing it, it would probably be 2 or 3 members a year.
See, there's another thing that I had raised it before quietly, but we never took any action. And there's a thing called affiliate marketing.
Yeah.
So we set this up with my company, and there's a lot of us on this call will go look at new product and say things about it, right? And I think it would be an incrementally small little step if we would take that review and post it on a YouTube channel or on the website or both, and then have a link. It clearly says out affiliate marketing, but have a link that says, and if you like this product, follow this link to go purchase it. And then if you purchase it, you get cash back. And I suspect that there's enough viewers of DPRG and we do enough reviews of interesting things that could bring in a little bit of revenue anyhow, because you can get I know for a fact that on a, what is it, on a, let's say a $30 or $32 item, we get $1 or $1.50, just because somebody bought it after seeing our description of it.
Yeah.
So that's how the SEO and all this stuff can tie together. And then we just have to make sure that we're straight with the state and the IRS, right? Because of 501. And it starts to get messy, right? It starts to be a lot more for the volunteers to manage. But
That's the other thing too. We don't want to make it so complicated that our treasurer quits.
Yes.
So, yes, sir.
David,
I worked for many years with 501c3, and it's my experience that what you're talking about is totally allowable. The whole question becomes what happens to the money that's raised, and it's plowed back into the 501c3. So that's no different from, say, selling coffee mugs or anything else.
Yeah.
It only becomes you have to handle it more carefully if that money is used for salaries.
We can't have any salaries.
So that's not a concern for us. As long as the money's plowed back into the club, I don't see that there's any problem.
Yeah.
That's my official professional advice.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on.
yeah, that's enough. That's 20 minutes of housekeeping. Let's put that aside because we're here to talk about robots and robot-y things. So I think, Pat, you had a question. Would you be so kind as to lead us off?
Sure. So I was hoping to have a presentation tonight with a robot rolling on the ground. And I spent the last few days trying to troubleshoot some problems. So as I set my robot to travel, I think it's about a little over 600 centimeters in the forward direction. So with no angular velocity, but trying to keep it on the path. So I'm always heading in that towards a target, which is essentially 600. So as I tend to go off to the left or to the right from my straight target, I apply a correction to try to get back towards that target straight ahead. The problem I'm seeing is that I was way overshooting my correction. So I basically give it 1/3 angular velocity. So I started off at 30 centimeters per second, so about a foot per second. And I was way overshooting, overcorrecting to the left or to the right when I'd be off. And I was giving it about 30% correction to try to get back on track. I slowed down to 15 centimeters per second, so it's about 6 inches per second. And I gave it an angular velocity of about 5 centimeters when I'm off target. So if I'm slightly off target, I'll give it 5 centimeters per second while still rolling at 15 centimeters per second and forward. So essentially 15 centimeters per second linear and 5 centimeters rotation, 5 centimeters per second rotation to try
What does
to
5 centimeters rotation mean? Because
Do you
rotation,
mean 5 degrees per?
yeah.
No, it's basically I'll give a difference in the two wheels. So one of them will go 5 centimeters or half that, I guess. It'll be about 2.5 centimeters faster on one wheel and 2.5 centimeters per second slower on the other wheel to try to correct.
So the angular rotation depends on your wheelbase, I guess.
It depends on my wheelbase, so it gets subtracted from one, added to the other.
Okay.
So what I find happening is I'm way overshooting my correction. And the problem I'm getting at is, on a robot that can go essentially from 0 to 100 centimeters per second, I'm down to 5 centimeters per second. So even if I remove the linear portion and I'm at 0 centimeters linear and 5 centimeters angular, I'm still overshooting my correction when I rotate. So I'm just rotating on the spot.
I have some thoughts on that. I don't know if I can. Who did I interrupt?
I was going to say he needs a PID loop.
That's what I was thinking of, actually. Is
The way that it's commonly handled is that in the PID loop, you integrate the difference between the two, and use that as a feedback. So the PID, the proportional is the speed from the encoders. The derivative is the derivative from the encoders separately for each motor. But then you take the difference between the encoder counts and integrate that and use that as the feedback.
Okay, so using the difference between the two encoder counts.
That's correct. You integrate that because you're essentially saying how much am I deviating, how much am I drifting, and you're integrating that and using that as the basis to bring it back in line.
Pat, we've talked about this before in control theory, where we typically use a PID controller, but a whole lot of the world doesn't use a PID controller. They just use a linear controller with a dead zone. And in many cases, that's sufficient. And basically for navigation, that's what I do. So the dead zone basically represents an error around your target. And that means you're close. You're not maybe pointed right at it, but you're very close. And so you don't do any correction inside the dead zone. And what happens then is that the robot will drift very slowly from one side of the dead zone to the other, kind of bumping off the dead zone. But to the naked eye, it looks like it's going in a straight line. And basically that dead zone dampens out in the same way that a PID controller would dampen out when you're oscillating around zero. Now also, if you remember the talk I did last summer, I do something else, which is that all my behaviors run through slew rate limiters.
Yep.
And so that means that that it usually takes several times through the control loop before you reach full value, because you're slewing to that value. So the first few bumps don't turn the robot very much. And maybe that's sufficient if you're close, if you're almost in the dead zone. So you never actually do ramp up to the full 30 or 15 or whatever it is you have it set for. So the idea is that you don't necessarily have to steer proportionally, but it kind of turns out that way when you're making small corrections, because the slew limiting guarantees that the first few attempts to correct the motor will be small. You have to go
David?
through yes.
Is that dead zone a linear distance or an angular?
Angular.
Okay.
So you say I'm wanting to head to 0, 0, but everything within plus or minus, say, 3 degrees. So a 6-degree window. And as long as I'm in that window, I won't make any corrections until I bump one side or the other. And
That's what I was trying to do. So I had a 0.01, I think, or 0.02 radians.
I don't
side.
know what that means. You have to talk in degrees.
Well, I know, but it's everything, all the math works out to radians. So I decided to try to put it into radians.
You know, the way we talked about that with Chris one night, because he does the same thing, but he turns it all into degrees because he's annoyed. What I do is I do it all internally in radians, but the user interface, the thing that talks to me, converts everything to degrees.
Okay. The reason I was having trouble with the radians to degrees is that sometimes I'll get a value of 0 to 360 or 359.999 or whatever. And then sometimes I'll get it to plus or minus 180.
Well, you can clip that. You can clip that yourself. Pick whatever one. I use plus and minus 360 actually. Plus and minus 180 makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's which way do you go? Well, which way is the shortest, essentially?
Yeah. So the idea is that the steering, what you run into is as you reduce the angular control, so that you don't turn as sharply. Well, you'll be able to more accurately get to the line that goes toward that object, but it'll still swim back and forth a little bit. To keep it from swimming back and forth, you reduce it so much that now when you're off, it takes forever to get back on.
Yeah. So the other one I'm having is that even when I'm sitting sometimes at 5 centimeters per second. So when I'm running up to speed, so when I did my original tuning at 30 centimeters per second, and my loops were doing really well. So I was ramping up and everything was working good. I've slowed everything down to 15 centimeters per second to try to get this under control. And I'm finding that at 5 centimeters per second, sometimes the motors are having a hard time going.
Now you're using a PID controller?
I'm using a PID on both motors.
PID controller should take care of that.
Yeah, so I'll have to take a look and to see what's going on again.
Plot those PID numbers and look at them. That should be obvious if you could plot them.
So the other question I had is possibly is my gear ratio too low now?
Too low. What is the gear ratio?
It's 50 to 1.
15 or 50?
50.
Oh, that's fine. That's plenty.
So-
I can't see that's a problem.
Okay. Because I've got a 6-inch diameter wheel, 50 to 1 reducer, and then my motors.
You know, and if it really is a torque problem, you'll see that in the PID controller because it'll be, swinging all over the place trying to control.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do a plot with it on the ground. And
Doug was just showing with his hand.
Yeah, I think one of the things you got to watch for is if you keep going down slower and slower, there will be a point where you have very few ticks per period. Now so let's say you have 100 ticks per period, and you're oscillating, you're reading 1 or 2 each way. So you're going from 98 to 102. All right, that's very easy to control. But when you get down slow enough where you have, say, 6 ticks per period, well, you're either going to be 6, you're going to be 7, or you're going to be 5. And you can see that the difference between 6 and 7 is going to be quite a bit on your quite a bit.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so you're going to be, so on that, it still should take care of it, but it's not going to be as smooth when you get down into that range as you move it up into higher speeds. David mentioned another way that can be done that emphasizes that zone where you're looking at time periods between ticks, and you're using the difference between what you want to shoot. But that's good for really slow, super slow stuff, but not so good at the normal speeds that we run. So we usually just count ticks. But you will come down, as you come down in speed, you will reach a point where it's a little rough.
But you could run a low pass filter on the ticks also.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is the problem is you're using ticks or integers. And if you're shooting for six ticks, and like I say, you're 1 tick off, you're quite a bit off. You're 20% off. And so that's quite a bit. But it should still run. It should still run. So like, you can run slower. Otherwise, you'll see that what you'll see is it'll bounce back. It'll overcorrect, undercorrect. And as you get up a little faster speed, it'll just come in and be perfect. So,
okay.
But that's at real low speeds.
So at 5 centimeters per second, I've got 17 ticks per 50 milliseconds.
That still should be good. You shouldn't have a problem with 17 ticks per period.
Okay.
I mean, I've had like the one with the Canon wheels, the hover sim. Yeah. I think I can run that down to 1 or 2, at most 3 ticks per sample period, and it still controls it pretty well.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
But you don't get your number won't stay at 3. It'll be
it bounces. Around. I mean, I can get it down to like 1 tick. It oscillates between 2 values pretty often.
On the other hand, that's really slow. And we're talking about the difference between really slow and just a little faster than really slow. And that's all. I've found it useful, Pat, and I'm not sure what your final goal is, but to run the robot around, you have a feel for what's the fastest it can go, and pick a speed that that's a comfortable speed to run around in the space where you want to test it. My robots usually end up running somewhere between 40% and 70% full speed. And once you pick that speed, then you can try to tune other things to match that speed, because you're right, they'll interact with each other.
Yeah. So when I picked the motors originally, I was aiming for 100 centimeters per second, and which is way too fast for indoors here. And so that's when I said realistically, okay, we're talking 30 centimeters per second. So now my reduction ratio and my counts per tick have dropped down significantly, by 33%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will say that's about this RCAT robot. That's about its top speed, but I never run it at that.
Okay.
When I run it around indoors, I run it at 40% of full speed. Also, when you're using that kind of differential steering, you need to stay away from full speed, because you can't, if you're adding rotation to one wheel and subtracting it from the other, once you hit 100%, you can't add. So you can only subtract.
Yeah.
And so your arcs and your curves change. So there's kind of a headroom up there. You need, say, 70% full speed to still have predictable steering.
It becomes open loop.
Yeah, I will say this too. When you might want to look at your maximum efficiency curve on your motor, and usually that's running around 50% full speed. So that's kind of the sweet spot if you can.
And I'm way, way, way below that.
Okay.
So
Well, I was going to say that in the final analysis, if you have a traditional Ackerman steered vehicle, then when you're driving at a fixed velocity, the amount that you turn is independent. So you can turn a fixed amount and drive around a circle and slow down and come to a stop. Those are independently controlled, but on a differential drive, they're not. They're coupled.
Yep.
So when you slow down, you begin to turn sharper. And so one patch of that is that, as I say, you pick a speed, 50% probably is good, and tune everything to work at that speed. And then you actually can scale those values by the velocity. Now that gets a little weird when you hit zero, because you're scaling things by zero. So it's not a straight ahead transform. But so what that means basically is that when you're going faster, you're not going to turn as sharp. And when you're going slower, you're going to turn more sharp. I'm sorry I have that backwards, but so that you could actually drive a circle and just reduce the velocity and come to a stop. If you do that with a differential drive, as you reduce the velocity, the turn will get tighter and tighter. So when you come to a stop, you'll be spinning in place.
Okay, yeah.
Well, that was a lot of hand waving. Did any of that help?
To me, it did. It's a few different things there. So one of them is, PID loop. So I'm using a PID loop on my motors, each motor velocity. So I'm correcting my velocity, but I'm not correcting left to right.
Well, I know what Dave's talking about, but you're going to end up with one pin on top of another one, and they influence each other. And I'd start with a linear controller with a dead zone and see if that doesn't give you what you need.
Hey, guys, would you guys mind if I experiment here? I want to try one of these whiteboard things just to see how it works. Can we do that?
Sure.
All right, I'm going to see. I don't know if this is going to work or not. I don't know what it is. Okay, it says it's creating a jam. Sure. Need access to the field. I don't know what it means.
Do you not have access? Let's see.
No, it says some people need access to the files. And it's got Carl and Paul and Ted.
Here, I've started a new whiteboard. Oh, well, some people, Paul, Paraba, edit. So, okay, I'm sending this.
Some people, that sounds that whiteboard look a bit passive aggressive to me. That's just, just say it.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're not following the right guidelines, are they, Harold? But
So there's anybody got a whiteboard? I don't know where, I don't see anything.
it just says a link to the jam will be sent to everyone in the call. Paul has got it. Hi, Paul.
Yeah, hi.
Yep.
Do you
You're
see
there.
anything on your screen?
Yeah,
What do you see? Is it like a
Scribble.
blank window?
no, I see a white window.
Is
You
it
see
all
me
over?
writing?
All,
It looks like this. So you can see Paul. Paul is the one with
Okay.
his little icon dragging there, and then I can add a sticky note.
okay. Let's see. So
Yeah.
so am I in this? No.
So I went to the whiteboard and you had to open it. It didn't open on its own. You have to know to open it.
When you say went to the whiteboard, what does that entail?
Well, let's see. I went to the dots, and the first option is whiteboard.
Yeah.
And then in there, the bottom thing says, DPRG Online is there. I clicked on that, and I'm signed in, and I'm requesting access.
You're requesting access.
I did the same thing. I requested access.
Okay,
just
that's
clicked on the
interesting. I
link.
don't see that. I went to the three dots and I can open a jam.
Right.
Oh, okay, I got it. So I can open this, and now I can see it. Okay, so
I don't know where the access requests come in. I'm checking to see if they happen to come in on email.
When I go to the dot, my top item is change layout.
no, okay. So if you go to the dot, you don't see start a whiteboard. If
Nope.
you- oh wow.
Change layout, full screen, apply visual effects,
Yeah.
report a problem, report abuse.
Okay. All right. Okay. There's on when I opened mine, it said, let me show
I'll
you.
show you. Like,
I'm reporting abuse.
oh boy. So like, if you can see my screen, if you look at the bottom here,
Yeah.
on my screen, it would look like this. You hit the three dots, open a jam.
That's what I have.
It opens this to the right, and then, well, that's interesting.
There's
Somebody else better
there's
think
two whiteboards. So if you pick the DPRG whiteboard, that's the one that everybody's writing on.
That's what we have you and me, right. And then there's another whiteboard.
I
So
get
got-
access denied on both.
Says I need access, and I requested it. It didn't do me any good.
Well, I think it might be coming to email, but I'm having a trouble getting in. I have too many browser tabs and too many accounts open, so I can't get at my.
Are you guys not able to click on the link that's in the chat window and get it to pop up a tab with the jam in it?
Open sharing settings. Let me see.
Yeah, there it is.
No, it requested access again.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it still
Gets
asks for
access and
access.
gives me access denied.
So
Yeah.
Carl's put out a jam and Mike's have pulled out a jam.
Yeah. So the way it looks,
It keeps notifying my phone when y'all do that. Why is that?
well, are you in the? I think it may be going to those of us who have Makerspace accounts. Is that the case?
No, I'm just using my normal Microsoft account. So,
Okay, because as I'm showing you, it shows up in, this is my Dallas Makerspace email, and it shows up here as a separate email request. So if I go in one at a time to share,
Well, it's opening up in my Google Drive. I don't understand.
well, I think it's implemented as a Google Drive whiteboard or a Google tool. Anyhow, I think we can sort this out, but we just have to make sure that there's a way to work across domains. So
okay.
You
Yeah.
did let me in with what you were doing.
it did work.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's I think that may be something to figure out. I mean, just set it up ahead of time.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't want to take any more time. I was thinking that this might be a place where we could talk to like Paul's problem. We could draw something,
Yeah.
But I'm finding that it's hard to draw with a mouse, so I don't know. It might be more useful on a tablet with a pen. But
The finger
Okay.
is easier.
yeah. Okay.
So getting back to the topic that we were on of counts per tick, this was a valuable discussion for me, and it's gotten me kind of worried because I've previously measured Mobot's encoder as giving 0.0075 meters per tick, and its maximum speed as 0.47 meters per second, which comes out to 62 counts per second. So if I were to run the control loop at 20 hertz, I would only be seeing 3 counts per period. So that seems like a problem from what you guys are saying.
And that's at full speed, right?
Correct. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, that would seem to be a problem, but I'm not sure. Are you sure you're getting that amount of ticks per second? It says how many ticks per second? 67?
62 is what I calculate based on the previously measured maximum speed and encoder meters per tick.
Okay, where
Meters
is the
per count.
encoder, Paul? Where's the encoder? Is it on the wheel?
It's on the it's on the motor. There's a and I don't know. I mean, I guess this discussion has been valuable because it says I need to go and look at this some more. But there's like 2 magnets on either side of the motor shaft, and they spin round and round. And then there's a reduction ratio. I don't know what the reduction ratio is, but
It sounds like your number of ticks per second is off by about 2 orders of magnitude.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what it would seem like.
I'll look at it some more. So, but thanks. I always get like great insights from you guys. So thank you. I appreciate it.
One thing you might too, look, Paul, I'm not saying they'll fit your motors because I don't know how big your motors are, but Pololu does sell some magnetic encoders for a reasonable price that you can add on to the back of small motors, like motors that are 25 millimeters across or 37 millimeters. So you can even buy the little magnetic wheels that got 20. Yeah, that's that's for the micro motors, but they have some for the bigger motors, don't they? Yeah, they have some for the bigger motors, but they have little magnetic wheels.
Ray?
That's the Pololu encoder for the micro motor, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, my motor is pretty big. It's like about 1.5 inches diameter, probably.
Okay, so that'd be around the 37 millimeter. You
Yeah, I
might want to
guess
look at
so.
the 37 millimeter
Okay.
and see what
Thanks.
they got.
Thank
The
you.
other one I did, Paul, before when I was taking my speed off of my wheels as opposed to off the motor, counting the ticks on the wheels, is I was using microseconds between ticks, and I was doing my calculation in the interrupt routine. So it would spit out a velocity as opposed to spitting out a tick count.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So measuring the period between ticks. That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Let's see if I've got that link.
More ticks is always better.
That's why I'm thinking of changing my motors from 50 to 1 ratio to, I think Pololu sells 131 to 1 ratio, which will bring me back into the mid speed of the motor.
Unless you're in the woods, then you'd want less ticks.
Pardon me?
If you're in the woods, you want less ticks.
If I'm in the woods.
Right. Those deer ticks are just terrible. Lyme disease. I mean,
all we have up here is snow fleas.
Other thing, and I believe Pat told us last week or week before that he's already done these, but typical as you know, a quadrature encoder, you get two signals, a A channel and a B channel. And the classic way to decode that is that you interrupt on the rising edge of one channel and then you read what will be essentially the center of the other channel to know which way you're going. But you can also interrupt on the rising edge of both channels. So that doubles the number of ticks. And you can interrupt with some controllers on the rising and falling edge of both channels. So that gives you 4 times as many ticks without changing the hardware. And I think, Pat, didn't you say you were already doing all those things?
Yeah, I'm interrupt on the rising edge of both channels.
I have on the ARM chip, I have it set up to interrupt on the rising and falling edge. And it does all the logic, so you don't, it just says forward or backward.
I think I might be lying to you. I think I might be doing on both edges.
I think when we talked about this before,
Yeah.
you said, yeah.
Because I was doing 32 counts per revolution on the motor, and now I'm doing 64 counts, which would be quadrature encoder.
So that's just another way to get more counts.
Yeah, I'm reading a change on both edges, rising and falling on both channels.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, so should I jump in then, Pat? Any more? Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, so I have not one, not two, but 3 updates tonight. 3 updates. So the first one, I'm just going to lead with the more interesting one, I think, the more fun one. So let me change to the right camera, which setting? This setting here. Okay. There we go. So, all right. And now what I will show is actual robot progress.
Actually, just back on the subject of the drift and what have you, I just entered a thing that says from mobile robots, and I actually put in the URL for the second edition of that. And there's a section there, page 257 on feedback control that shows where they're using proportional from the motors to control each motor, and then integrating the difference between the 2 motors to keep it going straight. Anyhow, there's something that was in reference to what I mentioned.
And they actually, if
It's no
memory
good.
serves
Yeah.
on that, yes, if
Yeah.
memory serves on that, they actually then
Yeah.
they steer.
If you're looking at that one, it's actually page 218. 218.
And Dave, I was saying, if memory serves on that, they were actually steering then through that third pit controller. That is by changing the offset.
Yes. Yes, they show that you put in the velocity essentially into the 2 motors for the proportional part, and then you have a offset into the integration value for turning.
Dave, we might need a different link. I'm not sure that one. It's got the funky encoding in there. Let's see.
Well, let's put it this way. I copied it straight from my
Browser. Yeah, it's not happy with it. So we'll have to. Someone will work on it. We'll figure out a way to find it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyhow, basically what I looked up was the second edition to the mobile robots, but if you're looking at the first edition, it's page 218. In other words, in this one, it's in page 218. And let me show you the figure, which is what I'm talking about. Does it show up? Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
So you're basically saying, what's the integral of my turning, and using that as a value to correct the motors. And I've used it in the past and to make things go straight.
Dave, will that work as well if you're turning?
Yeah, you feed in, if you look at the figure again, you feed in the amount of turn that you want. In other words, let's see if we can get that up there. If you look at it here, it talks about the bias that you're feeding in. And the bias you're feeding in is essentially what the angle is you want to turn to.
So your velocity, desired velocity on the left side is your linear, and then the bias would be your angular velocity. Exactly.
No, the bias is the amount you want it to turn. Not the angular velocity, but the amount, because you're talking about the integral.
So a delta angle,
It's a delta angle you're feeding it.
not a velocity.
Correct. So you're feeding it a velocity as to how fast you want the robot to be going forward or backwards, as the case may be. And then you're feeding in a bias that says, turn this number of degrees.
So would that be degrees in unit of time measure?
Well, remember you're integrating the value, the difference between the two motors. So the integral is essentially the angle. And so if you change the value that you feed into it, you're saying, okay, turn 10 degrees. So you want to feed that a ramping sort of a thing that says, okay, turn, 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 turn.
So what happens if you want to make it do 10 360-degree turns? Don't you like limit out on the bias?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit there. Say again.
If you want to do 10 360-degree rotations, don't you limit out on the bias if the bias represents an amount, an angle to turn rather than a turn rate?
Correct. So in effect, you would need to feed it a ramping sort of a thing, so that you at each increment you give it, say, every 20 milliseconds you say, okay, turn another 5 degrees.
So does this design have some limit on how many times you can rotate the robot?
No, there's no limit. There's no limit.
Hey, Doug, when you do like
The integral says, if you're going straight, the integral is going to be 0. The integral of the difference between the two is going to be 0 if you're going straight.
Yeah. So if you give it, just let's pick a number, you set the bias to 1, and let's say it turns pi, just making up numbers. Then you set the bias to 2, and it turns 2 pi. Then what happens when you've set the bias to 65,355? Are you limited on how?
It will. You are in effect saying, okay, the integral is this much. Keep turning until you get the integral down to 0. So if you put a huge value in, it'll keep spinning until it finally zeroes that integral.
Right, and then you couldn't put a bigger value in if you still wanted it to turn further.
Yeah, you keep putting, in other words, however much bias you put in there, in effect says, add this amount or subtract this amount from the integral, which is your direct.
But there are always limits to any setting.
Well, it depends upon whether if you're talking about, say, a floating point value, there's not a very reasonable limit.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
if you're talking about a 32-bit integer, of course there's a limit.
Okay.
Hey, Doug, I think you and I may do, okay. I have a routine that I say, move my robot so far. So each wheel has its own PID loop. And if those are working, it should move in a straight line, from whichever position it was sitting at. So I don't, try to figure out what the difference is between the two wheels. Each loop is running, there's a PID loop for each wheel. So if each wheel is, running whatever speed you tell it to run, it's a velocity.
Yes, but if those are not exactly the same because your motors are not quite balanced, then you need to somehow compensate. And that's what that loop does, is it says, okay, take the difference between the two wheels and use that as a correction factor to drive the motors.
No. Yeah, I would still say if your PID loops are working for each wheel, you shouldn't have to have any additional factor to steer.
You need 3, and I think that's what Dave is saying.
You think you do?
Okay. You need 1 for each wheel. And then the difference is going to be fed into changing your reference. Let me show, can I show a little bit of code? Have we hijacked this, Carl?
I mean, there's enough people talking. Let's say.
Okay, let me show a little bit of code here. And
it's helping me, all of it.
Okay, well, entire screen.
Yeah, I think the problem is when one wheel hits a bump or something and slows down, then the robot goes sideways, and unless you have something to correct that, then it's going to get off.
Yeah.
All right.
Or maybe one wheel's bigger than the other or something.
Yeah.
The wheel's PID
That
controller
shouldn't be
might
that
be
bad.
correct for that, kid.
All right.
And
Okay.
if one wheel slowed down, it would overshoot the other way and speed back up. So
Okay. So can anybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. See where it says no obstacle? That just means that I'm not going to show the obstacle routines because they're up above this. So I have 2 PID loops, 1 on each wheel. Okay. So the set point for both of them is equal to 0, which means I'm assuming that see where it says HD_era? That stands for heading era. Okay. So the set point starts off as being set to 0. When I run the input, I take the heading error and then I compute the heading error PID loop. That's the 3rd PID loop. All right. So what I've done here is I also limit the maximum turn speed, but that's not important. So, and this is also if you're trying to do something from if you just want to turn in place. Let's not worry about that. Let's move down to something. So, come on, Doug. All right. So the set point for the left motor is going to be the reference speed, whatever you're trying to, if you're trying to go 5, this is all in velocity. So if you're trying to go 5 millimeters per second or whatever it is, that's going to be in here. And you're going to add and subtract from the motor set points the value that you obtain from that the heading era. Let me see if I can find where that's. See if I can find it. Okay. Okay.
Doug, are you saying you take your heading error and you add or subtract that into your set point?
Right. Now it's a PID.
Not your set point, but your
you're
your
really
feedback.
looking at degrees, I want to say degrees per second in the rotation, okay? And so what it's doing is it's changing the reference. Now this is the actual PID loops for the motors, all right? And this is because the rotation has been set in the set point or the reference, it just part of the PID loop, and it just immediately, it calculates. And this is when they actually compute. And let's see, then it goes and communicates it to the display. And here's the set motor. So the set motor just uses the PID motor right and left outputs. And now I think this is equivalent to what David just showed in his diagram that he held up to the screen. So let me try to do this now that I've kind of looked it over again. All right. That's all. So again, the error starts off at 0 every time it loops through. Then it looks at the degree heading error. All right. Then it computes that value, the corrective value. All right. If the output of that PID loop is greater than the max turn speed, then it limits it to either the max plus or minus speed. Okay. Now this is a turn in place, so you don't need to worry about that. That's if you're in that case, but just make sure if your error is greater than a certain amount, it's just going to kick on a flag and it's just going to turn in space. But it's going to all be under PID control. It's never not under PID control. It just eliminates the forward velocity. And let's see, upper push maneuver. Don't want that. And then here again, this is it. So that rotation gets added and subtracted. So it's really that simple. I don't know if that helps.
My read on that is that's different, very conceptually different than what David described.
Yes, it is. It is conceptually different, but if you go into David's code, I bet you somewhere he's going to have, where's that equation? The plus and minus. He's going to have it somewhere. He's going to subtract from one wheel and add to the other. So the question is, where are you doing that?
In the picture, he is doing that. Any plus and minuses it?
The integral term gets added to the one.
Integral, you're confusing people with that because there's no integral to it. It's a PID loop. Now, and usually this one up here, the one for the heading error, is usually very simple. It's usually just, God, it's too much code in here. It's usually just, here it is. It's usually just a proportional. I'd have to look and see what I've got it set at. Let me see here if I can find that. PID loop H.
Okay, what I'm saying is that you want to integrate the difference between the two, because the integral of the difference between the two motors is your heading.
Well, the integral of the difference.
Yeah.
Or if you will,
then okay, I guess you could say that.
The sum of the difference between the two wheels is your heading.
Well, I wouldn't think, I'm trying to find if I have it somewhere. God, where is it? PAP, okay, here it goes. So here you can look at there's 3 PID loops. They're left, a right, and a heading arrow. And you can see in this case, I'm using a PI on the actual motors and only a P on the heading arrow. Okay, so that's.
Yes, but your heading error is the sum of the difference between the two wheels.
Or just the difference?
No, I see what David's saying, and yeah, that's kind of true. That's true.
It's got to be the sum of the difference.
Yeah, but you don't want to say it's what this will do is if you have any difference between your original direction and your heading direction, that error will be here. So it's not, it's really thinking only in robot velocity and robot rotational velocity. So that's, otherwise we're not talking about
The heading error is the sum of the difference between wheels.
Plain and simple.
no,
There's probably different.
because no, you can't-
That's only
That's not-
true.
no, that's not true, David. If you're saying, okay, I'm going in a straight line, then what you're saying is true. All right, but if I suddenly say my waypoint is over to the left, okay, I'm going to get a big heading error. All right, my wheels at that time, when I get the heading error, are going to be, if I was going straight before, they're going to be 0. Otherwise, the heading error was 0 before I decided to make the turn. So in this case, the turn would indicate a large degree heading error, which is this little number here. So when it computes that PID loop, it's going to have a corrective value. All right. That corrective value is going to be added and subtracted. And I've lost that particular line. You can see here, the rotation is the output of that particular PID. And then it's going to
That will be added and subtracted from the wheels. I'm just
trying to
saying
figure-
that the value that you're computing, if you're computing the heading, has to be the sum of the difference between the two.
Okay. What is it if I'm going in a straight line, David? What's the difference if I'm going perfectly straight? What's the
Difference
heading?
is zero, which
It's
integrates.
zero. Okay. Now I decided I'm going to go 45 degrees angle. So I tell it it's going 45-degree angle. So what's the next point? 1 point after you were going 0.
Okay.
What is it?
It's whatever your gain factor, whatever the rate factor is.
No, well, what I'm saying is that's what this outside PID does. That outside PID takes that degree heading error, which is simply the heading that you're at and the heading you want to go, the difference between those two headings. And I don't think they use another word besides heading. But anyway, whatever that difference between those, the target heading, I think it's target heading, and the heading that your robot is actually going, the difference between that is the heading error.
You're talking about the target bearing and your heading.
Right, yeah, so the difference between it is the difference between those two. That's the input. See, this is PID input. Okay.
What I think would help is rather than reverse engineering code or trying to interpret spoken formulas, I think it would actually help if we just had sketch of each, because I'm wondering if they're actually quite similar in what we're talking about doing here, the two different things. And
I think we're saying the exact same thing, just different words.
Well,
Yeah.
I think what it amounts to is there's
I have
3
a sketch
PIDs.
I can show.
There's 3 PIDs.
Put it up.
Okay, one for each motor and one for the heading error. Those are the 3 PIDs. The heading error is fed into the reference for the motor PIDs. So the motor PID is going to receive, depending on whether it's the left or right wheel, is going to be its target speed plus or minus the rotational correction value from the heading error. All right. Now, if you look at that diagram, Dave, I think that's what you're showing. I think you'll see that there's an input into the heading.
I 100% agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jordan,
There's no difference. But I'm just saying that
we're in
the
violent agreement.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying that the heading is the sum of the differences between the wheels.
Simply put.
Okay, but the input value for that outer loop is the heading error, not not the heading. All right.
I agree. And the heading error is the sum of the difference between the wheels.
No, that's the heading.
Error.
That's the heading.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, go ahead, Dave. Quick, save us from ourselves. Quick, quick.
Okay, well, I do it totally differently
Yes,
from
you
what
do.
was, from what was described here.
I argue with that.
And in particular,
Okay.
let's see. Uh-oh. I want to share my screen, my entire screen. You must grant
Speaking.
permission. How do I grant permission? Well, there you go. The Lord doesn't want me to show you my picture.
Fighting me.
I want to back up a little.
Well, you know, some of us will not just be able to handle the truth like that. So maybe that's a good thing.
Well, let me back up a little bit. To the first order, if you have a PID controller running on each one of your wheels,
Yeah.
your robot should drive in a straight line. If the wheels are the same size, and all other things being equal, that's all
Well,
that's
but it
required.
won't.
I would disagree.
But it won't, because the wheels aren't the same
Well,
size.
All,
The motors are going to be changing.
let me
you know.
rephrase that.
Even the
All
encoders aren't
true
the same.
Scotsmen will drive in a straight line.
But I mean, even if the wheels are the same size and the encoders are reading accurately, if something slows down a wheel, then it's going to turn.
Now, I could show
briefly.
you a video of exactly what you're describing. And what you would see happening is that that wheel, which hits something and slows down, the PID controller then ramps up the voltage to it, and it actually corrects back and maintains the same straight line. The
But
PID
it
controller
depends on
itself,
the PID controller and how well it's tuned. If the PID controller is tuned to never overshoot, then it can't get that, can it?
it's overshoot is not the right term here. When that wheel slows down, the PID controller sees it going slower. So it ramps the voltage up. That takes a certain amount of time. And when that wheel then breaks free, it has to go too fast in order for the PID controller to ramp the voltage back down. That's the only way it knows to ramp back down, is because the wheel is now going too fast. So the wheel went too slow and then too fast. And the average of those is it comes back on a straight line. It continues going on a straight line. So as I say, to the first approximation, if your PID controllers are working and your wheels are about the same size, the thing ought to drive in a straight line with just those two PID controllers. Now that's all I've ever used. And the
That's
steering,
true,
what Doug is describing as the steering error is something that happens at a much higher level. So when I want to turn, I don't say an angle through which I want to turn, but rather a rotational velocity. And I generally do that until the error condition goes away. So that's all happening at a much higher level, but I have implemented PID steering controls. And I've found that they didn't give me any improved performance over just a linear controller with a dead zone. Furthermore, PIDs, unless you get them adjusted right, which is not a trivial thing, PIDs tend to be bouncy. And so now you have a bouncy steering PID sitting on top of two bouncy wheel control PIDs, trying to figure out who's doing what, where the bouncing's coming from, and they interact with each other. So there's good reasons to avoid a PID controller if you can. So I say just a good old-fashioned linear controller. And by linear, I mean you're not adding in a proportional difference between your current heading or your current speed and what you want. You're just adding a constant amount. So the simplest
What's the
linear,
constant amount?
well, if it was the simplest linear integer controller, it would be 1, right? You can't add any less
So
than
you
1.
basically have a proportional controller with 1.
Well, it's not a proportional controller. It's a linear controller, because the error, we don't have a proportional error. No matter how big the error is, we're going to always add the same size to the correction. So that's why it's a linear controller. A proportional controller, the amount of size I add to the correction is determined by how far away the error is. So the farther away the error is, the larger the proportional error, the more I add in. But with a linear controller, you always add in the same amount. So it has less absolute goodness. It has less natural goodness than a PID controller, but I found them much easier to tune and make work as a practical matter.
My experience with the three PID controller method is getting the motor controllers is, the usual problem. With the PID, the turning controller, the heading error controller, that's usually very simple to set.
So
it's
Pat, here you have several different options that all have worked for the people who have used them.
Yeah.
So find what works for you.
So I used something like yours, David, where I had it either not turn, it turned slow, or if it was way off, it turned quickly, and seemed to work.
Yeah,
But
so
even then, you're actually doing a sort of a pseudo proportional control, right? Because you still are paying attention to the size of the error. A linear controller doesn't matter what size the error is.
And it also depends on how you want to turn. If you want to turn, say, like this, you by changing the different controls, like I like to just turn in place. That's my personal opinion. Obviously outdoors on an Ackerman thing, you don't want to do that, but on the inside of the motor, I just like my robots to turn in place and head towards their new target. So in that case, I just use these three PID controllers, and I say if the error is greater than a certain value, and usually I use 15 or 20 degrees, I say make the forward velocity 0, and then it just turns in place until it corrects itself. And then once you can have two values. You can have the kick in value and the kick out value. So you can have hysteresis if you want. So like you might have that say, don't kick in until it's 20. And once it gets down to say 5, kick out, and it'll kick out and then just head towards the other one. But if you don't do that, you'll have nice jet. You can literally create a set of curves, that you get there. So.
Hand waving par excellence.
Yeah, thank you.
Carl, I need help here. I'm trying to save my screen, and it comes back and says you must allow permission for your screen to be saved, and the only option it gives me is dismiss. Do I have to log out and log back in?
I don't know. I'm not getting any requests for you to share.
I think I've seen this before. You have to select a window, not a screen.
It won't let me get that far. I push the up arrow. I says, oh, a window, there it is. Can't share your screen. You must grant permissions in order to share screen. Dismiss.
David, I did mighty battle with that problem, and I found out the problem was in the browser. So I use Firefox, and up in the URL, Firefox has a whole bunch of little icons, some of which are like lock icons.
I see them.
And so I found that it was necessary to click on that, and then I got a drop down. And
share screen. Share screen. I see it.
Yeah.
It says blocked temporarily, and it gives me no. Oh wait, here's an allow. Allow.
Yeah. That fixed it for me. And then I think there's a setting. I found that's a temporary change that should work. And then I found I had to go into somewhere in the settings and make it permanent.
In Firefox.
Okay.
Or which Paul, you were in Firefox?
This is Firefox.
Let's see if that did anything. Yes. Yes.
Yay. Good team.
Some quirk with Firefox then, huh?
When you guys are using Firefox for Meet, do you have problems with all the little individual window panes freezing at times when people are speaking?
No.
So that's why I've got it. It's the only reason I have Chrome on my computer is so I can see the windows still active. Otherwise, they'll freeze for a long period of time. I can hear the audio.
Can you guys see something?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. This is a drawing from the talk last summer. And basically in outline, you can see that there's a PID controller associated with each wheel that drives the speed controller. And the input to that PID controller is arbitrarily at plus or minus 100%, plus being forward and minus being backwards. And as a matter of fact, I scaled everything to that. I found it more useful than scaling to inches per second or whatever, because that changes from robot to robot. And then there's this thing called motor command, and it expects a velocity and a rotation. And you can see that the left motor is just the velocity plus the rotation, and the right motor is the velocity minus the rotation. Now, those have to be clipped at plus or minus 100 to keep from overflowing.
So you see that's very similar.
And in my robots, everything that happens above that, as Doug was describing, if I want to rotate in place, all that really means is you have to drive the velocity to zero. And since a lot of my sensors drive the velocity to zero when they see things, rotating in place is not a special state. It just happens sometimes when the robot's going really slow. So the decision to navigate toward a waypoint is what generates the velocity and rotation inputs. But that's not, in my case, that's not part of the PID controller. And those are basically linear controllers with a dead zone.
So what's the rotation?
The rotation is also referenced in plus and minus 100. So where
Of what?
Of how fast the robot can go.
So you're not using
Degrees per second.
yeah, so but what that's degrees per second is an angular velocity. So there has to be something that's saying that you have an angular velocity.
Okay.
Other way, what I'm saying is you just somewhere you're translating.
If you look again,
you're translating the units of angular velocity into a speed.
No, this doesn't have an angular velocity built into it as a constant. It really amounts to an angular velocity that's proportional to the forward velocity.
exactly. So
And
let's
called the
take the
proportional
example.
control loop.
Let's take the example in which the velocity is 50 and the rotation is 0. So the robot is driving straight ahead at a velocity of 50%, whatever full speed
So
for
that
this
means your
particular
heading
robot
error
is.
is 0.
There is no heading error, but the rotation.
No, but you're
These are control
basically
inputs.
saying heading error is 0.
No, that means the set point for the
These are-
rotational velocity is 0.
These
That
are
doesn't mean anything about what the robot's doing.
These are control inputs. All
Yeah,
right.
but it's a heading error.
So the
Is you rotate? What I'm trying to say is, if it's truly 0, all right. If you
let me finish here, Doug, and I may answer your
Okay.
question.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
So we have a velocity at the robot center of 50. So we're going half full speed, whatever full speed for this robot is.
Yeah.
And we have a rotation of 0. So we're going straight ahead. So that means the left motor is equal to 50 plus 0. And the right motor is equal to 50 minus 0. So each one of the motors is delivered 50, and the PID controller is keeping the robot driving in a straight line. Now I want to turn to the right. A right turn is an increase in rotation. So let's say I set the rotation to 10. So now the left motor will be 50 plus 10 or 60. And the right motor will be 50 minus 10 or 40. So the outside wheel will be going faster than the inside wheel. And that's, in this case, the outside wheel is the left wheel going faster than the right wheel. And the robot will rotate, or I should say drive, in a curve to the right. Now, because we're adding to one wheel and subtracting from the other, the velocity at the center of the robot remains constant. We're still going 50 at the center of the robot. That's one of the advantages of doing it this way. And the outside wheel is going 60 and the inner wheel is going 40. Now suppose we reduce the velocity to 0. So 0 for the left motor, 0 plus 10 is 10, and 0 for the right motor minus 10 is minus 10. So our velocity at the center of the robot is 0, and the outside wheel, the left wheel, is going plus 10 forward, and the right wheel is going minus 10 backward. So the amount of turn all the way to turning in place is actually scaled by the velocity. That is, the faster we go for a fixed rotation, the slower we go for a fixed rotation, the tighter the angle. The faster we go for a fixed rotation, the looser the angle. That's why I was saying you can actually play around with scaling the rotational velocity by the center of the robot if you want to keep those constant, but I haven't found that necessary. There's an actual advantage to doing it the other way, because generally when you go faster, you don't want to steer as sharply. And when you're going really slow, you generally do want to steer sharply. That falls out automatically from this algorithm. Now, if I, at a higher level, I want to run a navigation, then the navigation is calculating the position of the center of the robot and the position of the waypoint. And it knows whether that's left or right. And therefore it can generate the proper rotation value to steer the robot toward the target. But that has nothing to do with the PID controller. That's coming down as a command from a higher level. The error in that point, the error is the error between the current heading of the robot and the required heading to point to the target, and there's no PID controller involved there at all.
Okay, when you review what I showed on the screen earlier, you'll see that equation that you have there for left motor, which you're calling velocity plus rotation and velocity minus rotation, are essentially what I'm saying is the reference for your input to your motor controller. All right, so there we're in complete agreement. Now, the question is where you got your rotational value. If you're telling me that you, if you have let's say, okay, I don't want to say without saying heading error. If you want to make a big turn, okay, does the rotation increase?
No.
It doesn't increase.
No.
So
it's a linear control.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Okay. So there's the difference. It's the input or the calculation of the rotation.
Yes, okay. And I think also because on these robots, steering is just a matter of an input that goes to the rotation control. Whereas on the algorithm you just described, steering actually taps directly down into the PID controllers.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it's more complicated. And as I have found,
it's really not more complicated.
There you go, Pat.
Choices.
But anyway,
David,
somewhere
would you say you're turning to your waypoints in large arcs? Then
again, it depends on how fast. Yeah, I don't rotate and then goes toward it. I drive in arcs.
Right.
But the size of the arc is not fixed, even though the rotation, even though it's a linear controller. And I've described this a number of times. I obviously don't have a good way to describe it, because the amount of turn is proportional to how fast you're going, or inversely proportional to how fast you're going. So as the robot changes its velocity, the arcs change. So when it's going very slowly, it's turning very tight compared to when it's going fast. So in that sense, it's not a fixed arc. It's a variable sized arc depending on how fast the robot.
Yeah, and that can be very advantageous because it means the robot's less likely to tip over because it's going fast and it tries to make a tight turn or something.
And also, if you're going really slow, it's probably because you're feeling your way around cautiously in the presence of a whole lot of obstacle detections. And so you probably want to be able to steer real sharply, but not go fast in that environment. I think I would make a motion here that we let Carl get back to where we so rudely interrupted him.
I second that motion.
With our PIDology.
Okay. So I'm going to say,
let me say this.
Oh, no.
I was not suggesting necessarily that the PID, that the integral or the summation of the angle was necessarily internal to the PID at all. That is part of the control that's feeding in as to what you want the overall to be. So What I'm suggesting and what they're talking about here is that the angle that you're at is the sum of the difference between the wheels. Okay? You use that as basically, where am I heading now? You feed that into the PID controller. That's not integral to the PID controller. Now, the fact that the sum of the difference between the wheels happens to be the integral was a confusion factor and has nothing to do with the PID.
Yeah, I thought that I think I understood you, Dave. I was just saying that was a confusing way of saying it because people would get it confused.
I apologize for using the term integral. I should have said the current angle that it's going at is used as the feedback, and you compute the current angle by taking the difference between the sums of the wheels.
You know, some language resonates with some with others, but I have a question. So if you think we've had too much hand waving or we're going to ready to park the hand waving, raise your hand. Okay, that was a joke. So we're going to, okay, that's too much. Okay, all the hand waving, let's watch some robots turn. So a video, an actual video, robot moving today. So if you would, pin my video to your screen so it's full screen.
Hand waving begets more hand waving.
So does everybody have it pinned? I have my crazy, not so good laptop camera pinned. Okay, so here we go. Rolling robots. Finally got this going today. This is duct tape and baling wire with a PID loop on top of motor velocity PID loop, heading PID loop. So it found the cone, used vision to know that it got there, turned itself around. Sees the cone. Well, there's a serial port problem we'll get to, but found it again, backed up. And
Look at that.
How about, and I have some other tuning to do on here, but anyhow.
And it's so graceful.
I mean, for duct tape and baling wire, who can argue with that, eh? Okay. And may I ask, is that kind of smooth in terms of video playing?
Reasonable. Yeah, it's reasonable.
Yeah.
Reasonable smooth. Okay.
So seems like it looks like the resolution is a little degraded sometimes.
Yeah, a little blurry.
It's a decoder trying to figure out exactly where the edges of things are.
Oh no, it went awry. What happened there?
Oh, well, so it turns out that I had, in diagnosing the problems in the last 2 weeks, I backed off and went to the original algorithm. The original algorithm just says, based on whatever angle it was, whatever the heading was as it discovered the cone, then do a 180 turnaround. And at that point, when it discovered the cone, it was not square on where it wanted to be. So it returned to the wrong 180. So I'll clean that up next time. But I'm about done messing with this for reasons I'll get to later. But anyhow, finally, that's going. So what I thought now, thank you. Yes. Voila, yay, hooray, finally. Sloppy as can be. And this is an example of the PID loop doing its damnedest to take out the sloppiest systems in the world, right? Errors all over the place.
Carl, how far away can you see the cone?
I hadn't checked that, but it was pretty far. I mean, it'll recognize. I can show you here a little bit. With the,
I mean, instead of turning 180, can you just turn until you see the other cone?
That could be possible, although you'll see here that I wanted to back up the minimum distance, right? I didn't, if you do it the way you're saying, it would have to back up twice the radius. Whereas this way, it only has to back up 90 degrees, so it doesn't have to go so far off of the beaten path. So
I thought the problem was right there, where it thinks it's going straight to the cone, but it's not.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on. So I want to prove that by it knows the heading when it leaves. So I was thinking to just cache the heading, the outbound heading and the return heading, and then just always return to those headings. Don't even measure what it is when it hits the cone. Just always return to that. Because right now this uses just a velocity loop and a steering loop.
Okay, so if it's running just the way it's running, nothing different, nothing different. Keep turning until you see the cone.
Yeah, that's, I mean,
But that wouldn't work if the cone was,
too far away.
yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that's why I did it this way, because this was my initial plan for August, was when these are Robo Columbus spaced, it's probably not going to see the cone. So.
Okay, now I have a question.
Okay.
And, very seriously to be considered by the club. That is, do you get a gold star if all you did was show a video of your robot working? Do you actually have to show the robot working to get a gold star?
I say gold star.
And
Yeah.
Gold
that's
star.
semantics right there, baby. That's
Yep.
semantics on that one.
You're killing me.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
Doug is the official keeper of the record. So
So I'll put a gold star for Mr. Carl
All right.
because that's a great demo.
okay,
Yeah.
what if we just say, well, you can't show this one again and get another gold star,
No, that's right.
even
That's
if all of us, even if we've all forgotten about it.
Yeah, but what about if I
like
make
that.
changes next week and it just keeps going back and forth?
Well, that would be good.
No, you
Okay,
can show
okay.
us a different video. You just can't show us this one.
Okay, you won't see this video again. I'm sick of it. Except I'll show you this. There was a question. Oh, go ahead. If there was a question about this, then I was going to move on to how I made the video stream cleanly. Any other? Okay. So earlier on, people were asking how. Huh? I'm going to echo. It's confusing me. So the question at the start here was how am I presenting videos without it having all that jumpiness going on? So I'll show you the tool that I'm using, which is OBS Studio. And I think I have a link for this I can share actually later on. So right now, what you're seeing is a screen scrape, okay? So while I'm presenting, basically Meet is scraping the pixels off of this screen. And you can see that when it does that, the video is kind of jumpy in the way that it gets to you, right? But when it's,
It'll go blurry here just in a second.
Yeah, it's a little jumpy.
it's a little jumpy. So
Yeah.
it's kind of jumpy. And whereas in contrast, whenever I stop sharing, what you're seeing is basically the same tool streaming the video straight into Meet. So it doesn't have to do the transcoding to the screen and then scrape the bits off the screen and then code them into the video stream. It's just transcoding straight from the video file into the Google Meet stream. Okay, so and then the way that works is this tool. I have it pre-configured, of course, but it has a couple of panes at the bottom here. So what you'll see is I have this list of different scenes. So if I go to like this scene, it's my laptop's camera. If I go to this screen, it superimposes and composites the DPRG logo. If I do this one, then it does some chroma key mixing up before it feeds the stream out. And if I come down here, it selects one of these stored videos, or I can do, this was the video before when I did it in the backyard and it was just absolutely not working or sort of working. So you can just toggle between these videos if you have them set up ahead of time.
Now that one looks jerky to me.
Well, remember, you're looking at the whole, you're looking at a screen scrape.
Ah, gotcha. Right.
If I stop this, now if you just watch my video feed, it should not be jerky. It should be pretty smooth,
Yes.
relatively so.
Yeah.
Where am I meant to see your video feed?
If you do the, this will be ugly. So if you come in here, oh wait, I have to
Yeah,
stop.
you're talking about here, and if I do this and I do that, and I'm not seeing anything. Am I the only one?
No, I'm waving my mouth hands, aren't I? Okay. What I'm talking about is, okay, so here's how to, do you know how to pin a video, Paul?
Yeah.
So right down here for mine, this is the feed from my webcam. On my screen, do you see this? It's on the right third of the screen.
Oh, hold on. You've got two. You've actually got three entries in the meeting people. There's the meeting host, and
yes, sorry.
there's the presentation, and then there's another one for the meeting host.
Yeah, there's three of me. One will always be black because I mute it.
Okay. And then I've got the presentation.
Yeah. And then off to the side beside the presentation is my camera feed, or whatever I feed into the camera feed.
At the moment, I'm seeing the infinite mirror.
On the lower right of my screen.
I'm seeing the off to infinity copies.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's hard to show. Well, so when I stop sharing, and then when I talk, when I talk now, it's showing my camera feed, which at the moment I have selected actually this tool, which is a virtual camera, which is my video, I think.
Yeah, I'm seeing the robot in your back concrete, back
Yeah.
driveway.
Yeah. Whereas if I would go back to my tool, which you can't see, and I would select this one, then now you see it mixes from the mixer, it selects a different feed.
Yeah.
So the
I think
point
we
is,
see the results, but not how you're getting there.
but this is how, okay, so this is how I'm getting there. So this tool right here, this is called OBS Studio. It's it's freeware, okay? And what it does is it has the ability to spit out, it basically accepts media from many different sources and lets you mix them and composite them together, switch between them, and then it can output video to a number of different streams. So what I've done is I have in the infinite mirror thing on my three dots here, if you watch the bottom one, I go to my settings, video, OBS. So I toggle between the Brio camera, which is my good external camera, and then I toggle between that and the OBS camera, which is the output of this tool.
Oh, okay.
All right. So basically, this tool is like a mini production studio, and it lets you take any kind of media and mix it together. So I can, if it's still connected, I can. Yeah, I'm presenting still. Yeah. So I can still go back and I could run through like my HoverSim presentation as I gave to Seattle Robotics Society, because I still have it loaded in here. And it's got all the media still lined up, and it lets me toggle smoothly between there. So you can select all these different scenes, and then you can easily transition between them. You can attach different media. So you'll see like here, for the logo, you'll see that there's two elements on the sources. This one has a banner, and I can change that just as you might expect by moving a box around. I can relocate it, resize it, whatever. And then the laptop camera. And I can mute the laptop camera. I can mute the other things. So there's all kinds of things you can do with this tool.
Nice.
It's really handy. And like I say, it's the only way that I've found, after trying a number of different ways, VLC and I don't know what else, it's the only way I've found where you can pretty consistently read a video file and have it fed into the feed on a online web share.
Carl, have you ever
That's on
used these?
YouTube, by the way?
I'm sorry, who's first?
I'll go.
Where's Ray?
Yeah. Have you ever used these? This takes HDMI on one side and spits it out in USB on the other.
Not in like before HDMI. I used it for composite.
Oh, okay. this, you can attach it to the output of a Raspberry Pi and use it as one of the inputs to OBS. So
Oh,
it's
cool.
pretty handy.
Yeah.
And OBS or some version of it. There's Streamlabs, StreamYards, that kind of stuff. They're all really offshoots of OBS. That's what all the Twitch streamers use. That's what a lot of the YouTube live streamers use to do all these multi-cut shots and pictures and all that kind of stuff. And you can do some really crazy stuff. Like, for instance, what Carl was showing you there was they call them scenes. So it's a scene, and a scene is a number of video elements. It could be just one element. It could be several elements. Then if you get really creative, you can do scenes within scenes. So you can use a scene as a element of another scene and start overlaying these things to get all kind of crazy stuff happening. It's really pretty cool.
Hey,
Harold,
Harold.
are you running that under Linux?
Say it again.
Are you running that under Linux?
I am not. I got it on a Windows box.
Anybody here running it under Linux? I just went and looked at their webpage and they said that it was included in the RPM installations. So I went and I ran a Yum OBS search and it came back and it said OBS Studio for x86 underbar 64 and development libraries and everything. So it looks like all I have to do is say yes and I'll have it.
Yeah,
Yep.
I would not
Yes,
be
it's-
surprised. It's open source, and it's been around for a very long time. They're like up to version 25 or something now, or whatever.
Well,
it is.
let's see what this says.
It's a great tool.
Yeah.
And I've just pasted a link. I did a write-up on this at some point on my test website. Well, I did a presentation to DPRG in September of 2020. So anyhow, you can find that in the link that I included on the chat.
And
Harold,
much like most of the designs, the 3D software and CAD and all that kind of stuff goes, you can use this effectively with just a few scenes and a few things. And if you want to go crazy with it and go deep diving and do switcheroos and transitions and all that wacky stuff, you can really throw down a professional level setup with this if you really want to go that far.
Harold, this says that it's version 26.1.0.
Okay, so I'm off a version or two. So I know there was a lot.
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to do it.
Do it, man. Do it.
And if you look
We're
closely,
right here
you'll
with
see
you. We'll hold
Harold,
your hand, David. We'll hold your hand. You can do it.
Uh-oh,
Harold,
ready?
that your banner is from OBS up there, Harold? Your Harold Poacher purple
Yeah,
banner?
what you're seeing right now is OBS in that lower third there with the banner.
Yeah.
This is a scene I set up, and I can do other scenes. Like, for instance, if you want to see what my desktop looks like, which is a mess, you just want to see it, the laptop I'm looking at right now on the thing. You want to see the Mr. Big Head camera I've got going around over here and that kind of stuff. And what I've got going on now, how I'm switching that fast, is I've got a keyboard that a friend of mine sent me that I built on the stream itself, so I can do a whole bunch of things. And what you're not seeing switch on the other side, I've got it in studio mode, so I can see them switch. So I can switch back and forth between things pretty quickly just by pushing a few keys. I know where the keys are. I don't have them labeled, obviously. And,
Okay, Harold, it downloaded successfully and I'm running it. And it came up and said, auto configuration wizard, do I want to optimize for streaming and recording is secondary, or do I want to optimize for recording?
For you, I don't think it's going to matter, but I've got it for streaming on me, and then I have it. And then what you can do is it's set up for streaming, but you can also hit the record button. So you can also record every bit of this local and then go back and edit it and do whatever you want to do with it.
Okay.
And that's, by the way, how I make so that's how I make the recordings for DPRG. So if you look at my feed, like this, the three screens on top are my normal laptop setup. And then this deal right here. So this old beater laptop is the one that records the meetings we do. And then I have an external monitor hooked up to that, which is basically a studio monitor. So basically I have this on the web page for the meet, this laptop. And then on this second screen, you'll see the tool bar for the OBS Studio. So this is how this is how I start and stop the recording for these meetings.
And how do you connect that to a Google Meet?
This computer over here, you'll see that if I do F11,
Don't lose the recording.
oh, I'm not going to lose the recording.
Okay.
I got good practice. So you see, this is just my browser, right? So I got Makerspace Calendar, I got the Google Meet going on, and then it's only on the other screen where it's just OBS is doing a screen scrape of this laptop.
Okay.
So that's
And you can do all kinds of other things. Like the scene could be a browser scene, which means I give it a URL of a browser, and it will go out and browse to that website for me, and then to show me the content in my scene as I switch to it in OBS.
Okay,
All
I
kinds of
see.
stuff like that.
I see your voice bouncing the mic auxiliary green trace down here, but I don't see any video. How do I tell it to scrape the screen? No.
This is create a scene.
It says no source selected.
so David, there's a bit of a learning curve for OBS.
Okay. I won't take up our time
Yeah,
today.
just go grab a couple of YouTube videos of how to start with OBS, and I'm sure you'll get them really fast.
Yeah.
The other thing that I have that I did not show off, what you're currently seeing my wonderful side profile most of the time at, is actually my makeshift teleprompter. I've got a camera set behind an angled piece of glass with the black drape over it, and a flat thing underneath that I can set a pad on it with a teleprompter up. So I'm actually looking through a piece of glass at you. So every now and then I will do commercials and things, but I don't use it very often. But I still have it set up all the time in case I need it. It worked actually way better than I thought it was going to work, actually, especially for duct tape and baling wire teleprompter versus the $300 units they want to sell to do the same thing. A little 3D printing. Where's Murray? Oh, wait a minute. And then a little 3D printing, some plate glass from Lowe's. The wife picked me up a bunch of black material from Joanne when she happened to be stopping by, and I got a $20 tripod and bolted it all on there. And it seems to work pretty good.
Well, Carl, thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's
Bring me up if you got any questions. It's
I'll go learn.
very handy.
Darn it.
Darn it, another tool.
No spoon feeding.
Spoon feeding is always, we only have so much time on this planet. I figure if one of us can spare 5 or 10 minutes and save another person hours, we should do that. So open invitation. If anybody wants to play with OBS, just give me a buzz. I do have one more robot thing to share. And then Paul, if you're still good, maybe after this. All right. So here we have somebody was griping about no live video of a robot. And I was planning to show this anyhow. So let me get this turned on here. All right.
That's gold star material right there, I think. Yeah.
We'll boot this up. Okay. So how well is this going to work? Can it focus? It can't focus worth a darn. This is not very good at all. So let me see if I need more light. Maybe that helps. Maybe that helps. And it's still as blurry as can be. Well, that's going to be crap to show. Although, all right. I have to show it a different way. But what I want you to see is right now, you see how this light is blinky?
Yep.
Okay. So what you can't see until I open up a different window is that this is the OpenMV Cam H7. And it's showing that in this moment, it sees a handful of candidate cone things because it recognizes the red over there almost as a cone, but it's correctly taking this one by the aspect ratio, the actual cone. So I can see on the feedback display here that it's got a nice solid lock on the cone, but then I'm using a UART to get the data from the OpenMV cam down to Arduino Mego buried under the duct tape. And what the green light is showing is that for whatever reason, it is frequently missing the data from the cone. It's just not getting down to the Mega. And when I was fighting this earlier until this weekend, I finally figured out this weekend that one of the reasons was that the OpenMV Cam H7 is 3 volts and the Mega is 5 volts. So, okay, I put a level shifter on it and it started to work better. But now I think the next thing that's going on is that the Mega is just not up to so many time critical things. So basically the Mega is it's got like soft servo PWM on 2 channels. It's got I2C to the IMU. It's got regular updates to a NeoPixel strip in the ring. And it's got my 20 millisecond loop timing. So it's got all this stuff going on. And I think it's just missing UART data enough to really give me grief. So that's what I think. And David, you're muted. But I was going to show one other thing on the screen then so you can see how rock solid the new video algorithm is.
Carl, you're talking to that camera over USB?
It's the OpenMV Cam. Right now I'm talking to it over, well, as soon as I click this button, now it's talking over USB.
And is that the H7?
Yeah. Well, my laptop's talking to it over USB, but from the H7 down to the Mega, it's a UART serial. So, but you can see it's nice. It's pretty rock solid, and so I was pleased at that. Most of the time, it's a little lighting sensitive still, but pretty robust under a pretty wide degree of lighting variation.
Be interesting to see how that works in sunlight, because I remember a problem I had one time where the cone was orange on the shady side, but was quite clearly, even to the naked eye, silver from the reflection of the sun on the right side. And it failed to identify it as a cone. It didn't match well. And I just thought of that because I see that white stripe of reflected light down the cone. And as that gets worse, it'd be interesting to know how quick, at what point it no longer sees it as a cone.
Well, I have 2 answers for that. And why is this not, just a second.
So you're using LAB on the video format, right?
Yeah, I'm using Lab,
Yeah.
which seems to be pretty good. And
Mm-hmm.
it seems that maybe I have too much going on here.
Paul, you may remember that for that reason, at least at one point, we wanted to hold those competitions in June, where we have the least shadows, where the sun's.
I don't remember that, David.
Yeah, the sun's as high as it's going to get, at least.
Cone needs some shade, huh?
Ah. Well, this window's not opening. So the one answer is I was going to show you the tuning tool for getting the right lab values. And then the other thing I was going to mention is I haven't done it yet, but this current algorithm, right now it works on a single pass of the frame buffer using a single set of lab images, thresholds. And to address just that problem of the different lighting in different conditions, what I was planning to do was actually to take the code so that it grabs a blob from the image sensor snapshot. It takes an image snapshot, and then it runs the algorithm through like 2 or 3 even different thresholds, and then just declares the best looking candidate out of whatever thresholds. And I thought in that way, if I find different set of thresholds that work for different lighting conditions, I can just let them all run at once, and I don't have to worry about trying to toggle them at any given time.
Cool.
So,
Yeah, I would even wonder if you have to do that. I mean, it's kind of like a lone cone out in the, the grassy meadows. So there's not much else that's orange out there. So
well,
it
like
may
it
work
to be
just
robust
fine.
though, right? Because there might be somebody puts up an orange piece of paper as a decoy or something.
Ooh, oh boy.
I've run into a
Let's
case
hope
where
that doesn't happen.
I was running down at the park that's not far from my house, but the city was doing a bunch of construction on that park, and they had these orange netting, this kind of
Mhm.
plastic netting set up
Oh
so
yeah.
it wouldn't hit trees and things. And at that point, I was just looking for the color. I wasn't constraining it any other way. And those things were much more attractive than those little dinky cones.
Last time, wasn't there a big red barn that kept throwing everyone off too?
Big red barn.
Yeah,
The
in
last
the
competition.
background. In the background, there was a barn on the first corn.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there was also, I'm not sure how many people got that far, but on the second cone, David sent, excuse me, God, Steve had something in his yard, a flamingo. It was an orange flamingo. So if anybody had gotten down to there would have been a possibility of picking up the orange flamingo.
Oh. Huh. I didn't remember that.
There was a famous contest that we had down at the Perot where same algorithm looking for orange soda cans, and a little girl standing at the end near the goal with nice bright orange tennis shoes.
Yeah. And then there was the
Yep.
Steve Rainwater event with poor Eric who suffered every year coming close because he would always run into some weird issue. In that case, Steve stepped out behind a tree with a camera to take a picture of Eric's robot hitting the cone, but he had orange sneakers on it. And that robot just turned. It was like ka-chunk. And off it went to Steve. And he never did catch his cone.
But we have all threatened since then to wear bright orange clothing.
I think in the rule that's even out in the rules, you can't do that. But you can't do that in a public event. You can't go tell somebody, some little kid, you got to go step away.
You screw my robot up.
Here, put on this coat.
Yeah, there you go.
all I know is that I've just been amazed at watching the Tesla and see how well it picks up cones on the road, because it is, you see Jack's nodding. It's just amazing how accurate it is on correctly finding cones and not incorrectly classifying cones. So it's just really accurate. Well, that's all I had. So enough of that. But I was thankful if Farmer actually do things with robots.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
After a few weeks of non-robot-y things. So
yeah.
Is that the OpenMV Cam H7 or the H7 Plus?
H7 Plus, I think, with the LCD shield, and I highly recommend the LCD shield.
Yep, it slows things down a little, but it's always telling you what it sees. It's great.
Yeah. So, okay, well, with that, I would yield, and I think Paul, you had a topic that you mentioned was also healthy, longer topic, maybe.
Yeah, several items actually. Let's see. So first of all, are you seeing my screen? I'm sharing my screen out and me on the camera.
Yep.
Okay, so I wanted to give an update on the build of the robot electronics. So last week represented some kind of a milestone in that I had gotten the robot to where it was last time I worked on it many years ago. In fact, for a little further, it could drive itself, and it could run in simulation. So,
Paul, I see scope probes there.
yep. I'm actually going to show a scope trace too.
All right.
So anyway, I've added a few things to the hardware. So that's one item that I want to provide an update on is hardware improvements. So the BMS battery management system came in. That's that red thing down there, a Dali 30 amp BMS that controls the lipos and prevents them from over discharging or overcharging. So I added that. I had this down in the tucked away in the corner here, not all that visible, is an ancient Razor 9DOF IMU and compass, and it seems you can't buy IMUs for love nor money these days. So I resurrected this, and I figured that will be Mobot's IMU for now. And then the other thing that came in was the feather.
ESP32.
So yeah, the ESP32 feather came in, and so when I did the demo last week, the RPi, which is sitting under here, was driving the robot and driving the USB serial off to the robot, so it was running under Linux, and that's not how I intend it to be. I intend it to have a real-time control loop section, and so I got this. So that's going to be implemented by this feather, and I've got a wing on order that I'll put some. I got some level translators because I got to translate 5 volts out of the robot down to 3.3 for the feather. But encoders and the robot serial control will go through the level shifters and off to the feather. The other thing that arrived and is in this little box here that was holding the Arduino Uno doing which did odometry, is a RTK GPS module. It's a U-Blocks. It Sparks Funds U-Blocks. Sorry, it's so shaky and blurry, having trouble aiming it here. Spark Funds U-Blocks ZF9P. Neither this nor the IMU are hooked up to anything at the moment. I've just been doing the mechanical mounting. But what is interesting is so that's the hardware, and so I want to move on to the software now. And so I've got, I started documenting this stuff on my Google Meet page. Sorry, on my Google Sites page. And so this is the block diagram, RPi connected to the PoE injector and the Pico station for Wi-Fi, camera feeding the RPi directly through the high-speed USB, IMU and RTK to a USB hub, and also the BMS telemetry going into the USB hub, and then serial to the Arduino, to the ESP32, which is running Arduino and FreeRTOS. So at this point, I want to acknowledge the wisdom of this group and thank all of you guys for guiding me in good directions. Because when I resurfaced and rejoined the club at the back end of last year, I didn't really know about all the options that there are available, and so you guys have contributed to my knowledge, both in terms of the ESP32 and the fact that you can run RTOS under free RTOS under Arduino in it, and also PIO. So all of this goodness is like, wow, amazing stuff. So so I just want to show the how that looks, what the dev environment looks like, which because it's just as slick as can be. So just a word about the block diagram here. The ESP32 has a serial link coming from my laptop, which is, so this is the built-in USB serial that's used to drive that's used to reprogram the device, and also provides the serial port. You know, when you do serial.println out to the console, it comes out there. But there's also a serial line going up to the RPi, which will carry telemetry commands and status between the RPi and the motion control running down on the ESP32. So the dev environment is pretty neat.
So Paul,
You mean for free RTOS, the dev environment?
I'm going to show both,
Oh,
actually.
Okay. I was trying to
Paul,
figure out
you
the dev environment for which.
Yeah,
you have 2 USB ports on that ESP.
actually 3. And so one will go off to the robot, to the robot, one to the RPi, and the other will be the third, or the first one is the serial console for reprogramming from my laptop. So this is one of the great things that you guys pointed me to. And I'm sorry, I don't remember who specifically gave me this guidance, but they said, hey, you ought to look at Platform IO. It's great for working on Arduinos. And so I did. And sure enough, you can make a project. Here's a project called Packet Serial Test 1. Source is main.cpp. And so here is the main.cpp, and I can like do an upload. This is the same functionality as under the Arduino IDE, but you got all this other goodness here. So we can do that, and it goes off to USB TTY0, which is the USB to the ESP32, reprograms it, and then we can close that and open up the serial monitor, and that should be running and is running at the moment. Okay, and then I've got you can select all these different projects. You can like once you click on what the project is, you can here's my first Platform IO project, etc. So that's one thing that I wanted to show. The other thing is so this is Arduino, the Arduino build environment, and uploading to Arduino from code running on my laptop. And obviously the source code is on my laptop. It builds it and it uploads the ESP32 over USB. The other really cool thing that, again, someone here told me about was that you can also get code to do SSH. So here it's set to SSH into RPi4, the RPi. And so now I am having a little bit of difficulty here because I'm having trouble controlling whether I have one or two code windows. And I really wanted to have two code windows. So let me just go back to open. Anyway, so this code window is SSH'd into RPi4, and I'm actually looking at packet serial test 1, which is in source COBS test packet serial. So this is like, it's not in ROS, but I would use this technique for editing ROS files and launching ROS files on the RPi. So again, code running on my laptop, but editing files that are over on the RPi. That's pretty slick.
It's nice
Now-
workflow, huh?
Now, I do. There we go. There's a second window. So what's really slick is, okay, on this left-hand instance of code, I've got platform IO with main. Oh, that's actually my first platform IO project. So we'll close that, and we'll go to PIO home, and we'll open up a recent project, which is the packet serial test 1. Open that, and we're not really interested in the PIO, but what we are interested in is main from this project. And so I need to go to the projects and open it's packet serial 1. Yeah, this should be it. I'm not sure why I'm having trouble here. Oh, here we go. Yeah, projects. Okay, and open editors and packet serial test 1 and source, and here's main.cpp. There we go. So here's the Arduino code for that's running on the Arduino at the moment that I just showed uploading. Meanwhile, simultaneously with that, there's another instance of a code window here that's SSH'd into RPi. And so I can open that. Oops, that's not what I want. I want to go to SSH, and then so on RPi I've got packet serial test.py, which is so here I can edit on the RPi. Okay, so that's the dev environment with two instances of code, one running Arduino on my laptop and able to download to the Feather, and the other running an editor on my laptop, but editing files on the RPi, so I can like compile both sides and run them. So that's what I want to do next. So now one thing that I do want to point out on the Arduino is another thing that you guys taught me is Arduino on ESP32 actually runs under FreeRTOS natively. So you can call FreeRTOS calls like vtask delay, and you can spawn tasks. So I've got other projects here that spawn tasks and write to queues and so forth. So that's very well aligned with my goals of having an RTOS running on the low level controller.
Cool.
Okay, so the next thing I want to, let's see, where to go next. Yes, I think I want to go to serial next. So this is, I can actually do a demo of this. So going back to a block diagram, so I've been doing software architecture this last week, and this diagram shows the intended implementation of the software on the ESP32 and the RPI. So the RPI will run ROS and runs the usual sense, plan, and act loop, sensing involving the directly connected peripherals, as well as data coming up from the ESP32, odometry, bumpers, obstacles detected by and robot diagnostic data, and then planning involving considering those inputs of where am I, the obstacles, the current mission, and the robot state, plan the next behavior, and command the action. And then the action should be a command for speed, curvature, and blade on/off. The plan may also make reference to the current mission. So, for example, a mission could be to mow a stripe down the lawn, and might make reference to a map showing the boundaries of the mowing area. And then speed would go down through a packet transport over serial down into the motion control layer, which is running under FreeRTOS. So it's a real-time process down to motor speed control. So this is intended to represent the PID loops for driving the wheel motors and the ramp, ramp control and so forth. And then the output of that feeds out the robot serial interface, and goes either to robot simulation or off to real robot hardware. And I demonstrated the RPI talking to real robot hardware, and I demonstrated the software running under Linux on my laptop talking to a robot simulation. So what this picture represents is adding robot simulation to include the real-time layer, or at least the software in the real-time layer, obviously not running in real time since it would be running on Linux.
Huh.
So does that make sense in terms of software architecture?
Sure. You got a lot going on though. My goodness.
Yeah. But the nice thing is a lot of it is off the shelf. So what I want to demo is this packet transport. So we had a discussion last week, and I asked you guys, and I showed you that I had a Wi-Fi router in my block diagram at that point, and we discussed that I was thinking about having the ESP32 talk over the wireless network, but I didn't really want to put a Wi-Fi router in the same box as the robot right next to the station, to the Wi-Fi station that's meant to communicate back to the house where I would be sitting with my laptop. And Chris made a strong argument for using serial. and he said he emits serial. He just bundles all the robot data, nav data, encoders, everything up into one big struct and pumps it up a serial link to the RPi or whatever main computer he uses, and he pumps down commands for robot motion down to the low-level motion control layer. And I thought about that. I thought, yeah, this is great. I don't think I've got that much data that I need to transfer. The serial would be an obstacle. However, I raised this issue, this concern at the meeting last week, that the trouble with serial is getting it synchronized and keeping it synchronized, because if you lose a byte, then if you're transferring binary data and relying on packet lengths on the length to know how long a packet is, then suddenly you're out of sync and you got no way to get back in sync. And that and a variety of other problems make serial challenging. And I contend that what you really want is something that acts like UDP. So UDP is a fire and forget protocol. You construct a packet, you stick some data, you stick your data in it, and you send it off to its destination. And it might get there, it might not. You never find out. But what you do is you set up the system design so that actions are, as much as you can, repeated. They're sent repetitively on some fixed rate, like maybe 10 hertz, whatever. And similarly, robot status, odometry and such, comes back at a fixed rate. So if you drop a packet, then no big deal. As long as you can identify the packet boundaries. And that's where packet transport, where packet serial comes in. So packet serial is a neat package that I found with a little bit of a search. And what it is a package available for Arduino and also on Python that turns packets of binary data into packets with a known delimiter, a known packet ending delimiter. Specifically, it puts a 0 it ensures that any packet that you give it has no zeros within the data section of the packet, and then 0 is used as a sentinel indicating end of packet. So a packet serial module will just read in data, and it doesn't bother about anything until it sees the first 0, and it knows that's the end of the packet. So then after that, it just reads in data and decodes the data and puts the zeros back in where they belong in your data packet, and gives you back a reconstructed packet. So it has an encode and a decode section. And in the case of the Arduino implementation, it wraps a serial stream. And so maybe the best way to explain this is, well, so let me just walk through the code here in the example. You declare a packet serial object, my packet serial, and you tell it to begin with a baud rate of 9600. By default, it will wrap the Arduino serial port, and I will, you can redirect it to handle my serial port going up to RPi, so don't worry about that. Then you set the packet handler to a receive packet handler, and they call it on packet received. And on packet received will do will be given a packet after it's been received from the serial link and decoded. And so on packet received is a callback function running on the Arduino, and it gets the packet that was sent down from the RPi. So you can give it, okay. And then the other thing you do in the loop section is you call my packet serial.update, which goes out and checks if there's a new packet ready. And if there is, then it calls on packet received. So to receive a packet in setup, again, you do the begin, you do the set packet handler, pointing to your packet handler, and then that method does whatever it needs to do. It's passed in a buffer of bytes and a size, being the number of bytes that were given. And then to send data, all you do is you declare an array of ints and you pass it into the send function on my packet serial and pass in the address of the buffer and the length to send. And it will encode it. So it'll take the zeros out of your data and pump them through, encode your packet, send up to the other end, and the other end will decode it and put the zeros back in your data. So,
Paul, how does it keep track of where the zeros go?
I knew you were going to ask that, David, because that's what you would do. So I'm prepared with an answer, and it's very slick. It's COBS is the encoding method. It stands for constant overhead byte stuffing. And whereas some byte stuffing mechanisms, such as, for example, PPP, have an escape mechanism. So they use, for example, 7E as an escape. And if there's a 7E in your data, then they stuff the data with 7E, 7E, or they can put other bytes after a 7E to achieve other control functions. But in the worst case, that will double your data size. So if you've got 256 bytes of 7E, then they all get turned into 7E, 7E. The clever thing about this protocol is it goes through your packet looking for zeros, and it encodes, then it writes the number of bytes until it found a zero, and then the zero is assumed to exist. It's not actually sent. So here, this 01 indicates that there's a zero. It found a zero. So it writes, there's one byte with an implied zero. So when it's decoding an 01, it will replace the 01 with a zero. If it found, for example, a 1 and then a 0, then it would write 02, which is the length of the data before the implied 0. So, or in counting this byte and the implied 0. So, so it says you have X, which would be 1, and then the implied 0. So that's how it reconstructs your zeros, and the overhead turns out to be 1 upon 254. It's constrained to essentially 1 upon 254. So it's pretty neat. Let's see.
Can you go back to that for just a moment, Paul?
Yeah.
Sorry to.
Yeah. Oops. This one.
And then scroll bottom bar across the bottom so I can read the logic table there.
Yeah. But just to point out, here's an example of where they send 0C. So that's 12 bytes, that being hello space world. Okay, so code 0 is not applicable. It's not allowed in a data packet because it's the end of packet delimiter. 01 means no data bytes are following, and it means there's just a single 0 byte in your data. N means there's n minus 1 data bytes, which are followed by a single zero. So they don't send the zero. They don't have to, because the N tells you how many data bytes are follow. So it's sort of like they're encoding a length and then an assumed zero at the end of the length within the packet. Does that make sense? Is that what you're looking for, David?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm still a little confused. What happens if you want to send a bunch of zeros?
I
Isn't
tell
that
you what,
sending a bunch
let me
of
hold
seven?
off that question, defer that question, because I've got a demo where I can actually show that, because I've got this working between the ESP32 and the RPI. But I'd like to go back to the theory here.
Let me interject here.
Yeah.
Basically, what they're doing is they're, for each occurrence of a zero, they're substituting an integer.
Yes,
And so
that's
the one
exactly
to
right.
one.
Yes, exactly right. So going back to the how I'd like to use UDP, and how this packet serial module helps me use serial like UDP. UDP offers fire and forget, so you don't need to worry about queues backing up or drop packets. It puts a CRC or a checksum on the data, so you have, within a packet, you have data integrity. You don't have guaranteed delivery of a packet, but you do have data integrity within a packet. So I envision putting a CRC on my packet that I send down through serial. So that gives me data integrity. And it lets me start and stop the one side or the other. And when the other side restarts, it can pick right up at the next packet, because it'll detect the end of packet delimiter and then start accumulating bytes there. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So I came up with some use cases that I want to support, and I wish Chris was here, because I think that if he's doing the dumb approach of just blindly sending binary data and saying, after I receive 20 bytes, then I'll assume the next one should be the beginning of a next packet, which is subject to losing bytes. I want to restart autonomy layer or motion control layer and have the system resume operation, not have to fire up everything. Want to be able to stop the autonomy layer and the robot stops in the safe state. Want to be able to run autonomy and motion software in simulation. Want to be, if the system can't complete the mission, it should cancel it. So for example, it can't escape a bumper press or the critically low battery. So that has more to do with the interaction between a mission and the planning. And then to analyze logs and bags. So anyway, I got some requirements there, but let me get on to the demo. So I'm going to bring up code, get to my code workspace, and this is the Arduino, and let's just select the right project, which is packet serial test 1, and build and load it into the ESP32, and where it goes. And I hope this works, because I didn't see, I'm a bit concerned because I don't see a sign on that I should see. It should say packet serial test, and I'm worried about that. But now over on the RPI, let's switch over to the RPI. So I'm logged into the RPI4 here, and I'm going to run packet serial test 1.py, which is the other side of the link. And this is actually showing that it's receiving data, and the data actually it's receiving 3 floats. The first is the time returned by micros in the Arduino environment. The second is pi, and the third is a packet number. And if I'm really lucky, and this is working, then here we see the terminal output out of the ESP32 saying it received a packet length. This is a packet serial packet, length 15, type 1, which is a motion command, data length 9. And so then it decodes the motion command and says that speed is 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. And I've just got it set to the Python script is setting it to incrementing it by 0.1 until it gets to 1, and then resetting it back to 0. And just to drive home the point, and oh, by the way, I just on the hardware, let me just deviate for just a second. One of the along with the GPS came this GNSS antenna. So it's a multi
Band.
network. So it'll pick up GPS and Baidu and the European one and all that. So now, hopefully, if I just can stretch my camera cable a little bit. Do you see those 2 traces on the scope?
Yep.
So the top one is the Arduino. So I'm monitoring transmit and receive on the ESP32 up to the RPi, running at a 115 K baud. The top trace is the burst of data coming out of the ESP32. The Python script on the RPi receives it and turns around and sends that motion command back down to the ESP32, which then prints it, as we saw on the console. And I don't really understand why it's marching across here. I think it has something to do with I've got a 10 millisecond delay up in the Python script after receiving the ESP32's message before it turns around and sends the motion command message back down. So that's just to show that this is actually working. At 152, I'm consuming about a millisecond to a millisecond and a half for about 15 or so bytes of data. So that's it. That's the demo part for
Very nice.
Paul, question about your oscilloscope trace. Is the difference in time between the upper and lower trace represent the processing time on the packet before it's turned into commands for the robot?
No. Well, yes, and the answer to that is sort of complicated. I did measure the encoding time on the Arduino, and it turns out it's only 20 microseconds to encode those 15 bytes on the ESP32.
That seems doable on a processor that hot.
It's what, sorry?
That's a very fast processor, so 20 microseconds, I'm sure, is ignorable.
Yeah. So the varying delay. So here's the core of the Arduino code, David. I do a packet serial send, which sends 3 floats up to the RPi. Then I delay this task 10 milliseconds, and then call update packet serial my packet serial.update, which results in calling the on packet received method, which then reads which is past the buffer. So the time delay between the sent and received packets, the 10 the varying amount, and by the way, that amount is varying between a maximum of about
Oh, you faded away.
and a minimum of maximum about 25 milliseconds, minimum of about 5 milliseconds.
How can it be less than 10?
I don't understand that. It's a really good question, but I don't know.
That VTask delay argument is microseconds, yes?
No, it's milliseconds.
It's milliseconds?
Yes,
So you're delaying for 1,000 milliseconds? Oh, I'm sorry, for 10 milliseconds? And
Yeah.
that's a call directly to the RTOS, right?
correct.
So that means the RTOS is running here in this loop. Did you have to do anything to set it up, or was that all done in the background for you?
That all happens magically in the ESP32, which is like kind of magic. But there's another time delay, a timing element that should be considered. And let me flip over to the Python. So I think we understand this code here. We do a send, we delay 10 milliseconds, then we do an update, and we get whatever data came down from the Python. Oh, I know what it is. If the Python script hasn't sent down a new packet yet after this 10 milliseconds is done, then we fall through and we delay a second, and then we come back around. That's interesting. Okay, I'm not quite sure about that, but what happens in the Python script is so there's a while true loop here in Python. It does a serial read until it finds a 0 byte. So this is going to pick up the packet that gets sent out of the Arduino and wait until it does get a packet, and then it figures out its length and it decodes it, which gives us back our data with the zeros put back into it, and then does some checking and unpacks the struct, and then okay, so this is the end of the receive section here, and it prints what it received here.
Can you scroll that over to the right so we can see the end of the lines?
Yeah. Let me just expand. There you go. So let me just make it a little longer. So the while true runs this whole section on this page. So this is the receive section, and at the end of the receive section, it prints the received data. And then it goes into the transmit section. So it turns around after it's finished decoding and printing what it received. And does the transmit. So it here's where it gets the motion request and fills in the requested speed, and then packs it with a header, and then encodes it with the Obs encoder, and then writes it out to the serial port. So this is the lower trace, the one that was varying between 5 and 20 milliseconds. Yeah, between 5 and 20 milliseconds after the Arduino wrote. So it's a good question, David. And I looked at that and I was like, I asked myself, why is this changing? And I don't know the answer.
Well, once you said, let's go look at the Python, I thought, there's the problem.
Yeah, but I don't see it here.
No, I just mean the fact that it's Python.
Oh, that shouldn't be.
I was just making a bad joke, Paul.
Okay, sorry.
That is an interpreted language, though, right?
Yeah, but it should run pretty fast. So if you want, I can uncomment these two prints, and we can look at the raw data coming out of the Python, in which you will see the message with its zeros and the message with the zeros removed. But I don't know if that's interesting. You guys tell me.
What's the difference between the print and the serial write?
Print prints it to the console as a byte array, and serial write writes it out to the UART. So serial write writes it down to the Arduino. That makes sense?
That's how you're separating which port you talk to.
Correct.
Could the delay be, ROS, Linux, not real time,
So, I don't know. I'm not running ROS, and the fact that it has a minimum delay of 5 milliseconds. Yeah, I don't know. I can take that as a homework item to try and figure that out. But the other thing I wanted to share with you guys was a couple of video channels that I found very helpful for getting up on this FreeRTOS and PIO. So this one is a series of videos that go down through a bunch of how to use platform IO in code and how to add library dependencies and such. So let me just post that into the chat window. And then the other one is a long series of about 10 videos maybe, that is someone called Sean Heimel, who's apparently associated with DigiKey, has done a whole series of videos on, that goes from soup to nuts on FreeRTOS on Arduino. So he starts off with at the very beginning with what is an RTOS and getting started with FreeRTOS and the concepts of task scheduling, memory management, queues, and mutexes. And then he goes on into...
Paul, I think you're muted.
No?
No?
I was hearing him.
I can hear
I
him.
heard him just fine.
I heard him just fine.
Maybe I'm muted.
Your speaker's muted.
So, anyway, I'll paste this video in, because it's, if you just go to this YouTube video, that's Sean Heimel's video on FreeRTOS and Arduino, or series of videos on FreeRTOS and RTOS concepts and he's got code implementations, and he gives you problems, and you can go to his GitHub site and pull down his examples and study them and so forth. It's pretty cool. So I think that's the end of my demo. I just want to reiterate that I appreciate all you guys giving me all this free advice, and all I got to do is run off and research how to do it, and off I go. And so at this point, I would welcome comments, if there are any, on the software architecture or the hardware architecture. or if you want to look at code for like the packet serial stuff, I can do that, or go anywhere that you guys want.
Well, I think I look at what you got, and I think of what you've shown, and I'm thinking, really, we are catalyst for that?
Oh, absolutely.
How did that
Paul, the only comment I wanted to make is it's not complex enough. You know, I think it's too simple. You know?
Well, I found it very
actually,
useful.
Actually, there is one more thing that I do want to share, because I think it shows the future and the power of this scheme. So I envision packets having a packet type. So at the moment I've defined two, motion request message and ODOM val message. I'm not sure, I haven't implemented ODOM val message, but I can envision other packet types that might be interesting, like echo and lognet. I've got a list of about 10 of them. Robot status, log message, ROS diagnostics message, a ping and a pong with time, so I can get the two time synchronized on the two sides, maybe a restarted message to say, hey, I restarted. So you can envision this packet type getting enumerated, and a packet is going to be constructed of a packet header followed by a kind of packet. So I've only got one kind of packet defined here, the motion request. But imagine that there are like multiple packet types, you know, one for logs and one for ping and so forth. So the packet header contains a CRC, so that will give me integrity, and the on packet receive will run a CRC across the rest of the packet based on the length of bytes that it was given, and throw away the packet if there's a mismatch. So that gives me data integrity. Then packet type is interrogated to see how to interpret the data section of this packet. And then packet length would be useful for variable size packets. For example, log messages are typically variable sized. And then following the packet header, the packet data section would be packet type specific. So motion request would contain speed in meters per second, a radius, a turn radius, and a blade on message. But you can imagine the kinds of things that would be in other kinds of packets. So in my mind, this gives me, out of packet serial, this gives me all the benefits that I would have got out of USB without the Wi-Fi nonsense.
And you've got some, I presume, relatively robust libraries to lean on. So you can focus on what's important to your architecture, meaning these structures of the messages and that,
yeah,
without worrying
exactly.
as much about the actual lower layer protocol.
Exactly. Yeah. This is infrastructure, but by building on top of as much stuff as I can get a hold of, you know, I'll be good. And then, oh yeah, and then you can imagine the on packet received and the corresponding thing on the RPI side would take whatever message it got and put it in an appropriate queue out to some process or task that would process it. So on the ESP32, if it's a motion request, it would go down to the robot control process, as shown here, the motor speed control, and then that would might pass it off on a queue to the. So this would be a task, and then this would be another task on robot serial. So I get a fine-grained modular architecture using queues in the case of the RTOS software, between tasks. In the case of ROS, ROS is already modular, and you would envision the Python version of the on packet received publishing the data to a topic, and then whatever needs that data can is subscribed to it and can consume it. So all of this packet transport architecture and the use of packets over a serial link plugs very nicely into a modular and what's the word? The word into a modular architecture, into a
Robot.
There's a word, composable architecture. So ROS is considered a composable architecture because you use launch files to compose an application out of multiple ROS nodes. And similarly, you can envision this being thought of as composable. You compose, it's less composable than ROS is because it's less, the messages are less generically specified, but at least it is, the real-time section is modular, if not composable.
Paul, some of the sensors that I use are serial, and they generally have from the manufacturer some kind of packet protocol, often in header byte or bytes that you can then search on and drop everything and so forth. So does this mean that you'll actually be having to do a translation between the packet protocol defined by the manufacturer into this packet transport protocol before it can be decoded by the machine on the other end? Carl's shaking his head no.
I don't think it mandates it, but it's probably going to have to happen anyway, David, because in ROS land, you tend to try and use standardized messages, and they tend not to align with vendors' implementations of sensing devices.
So that rather than the sensor being read directly by the process that's going to consume it, it gets first translated into this more generic packet protocol?
Yes, for example, a ROS LiDAR node will read packets from like a Hiyokio, how do you say that word? Hoki, from various vendors' LiDARs and emits them in a standard ROS LiDAR packet. So yeah, that already happens up in ROS land for standard, for popular sensors. There are modules that will receive the vendor's packet and plug them into the appropriate fields on the ROS packet.
So for example, GPS normally return the NEMA paragraphs, which are basically made of what they call sentences, which are ASCII strings terminated with a new line.
Correct.
So, and that's a pretty common way for data to be exchanged in ASCII terminated by a new line. So that would then take that ASCII, and of course there won't be any zeros in a ASCII string, right? So that there's nothing to replace there. And but pull off the new line and put a 0 on the end of it, and basically convert its format.
Well, no, I think you missed something here, David. So first of all, let's imagine that GPS was plugged in down here and on the real-time layer, because GPS, I envision, will actually go directly into a ROS driver that understands how to translate NEMA messages into a sat-nav message, which is the ROS message. But imagine the GPS with its NEMA sentences was plugged in down here to serial on the ESP32, and it spits out a serial message. So all I got to do is plug that NEMA string into one of my packets, and the packet serial transport takes care of eliminating any zeros if there were any, and yeah, it takes care of the encoding. Maybe that's not a real good example, but a better example, David, might be the obstacle sensors, because I do imagine that I'll probably put one of these VL53LC-L5CXs on, just simply because I2C is accessible on the SP32 and less accessible on an RPi, I think. So that might be a better example of a vendor specified message that could contain zeros. So at the software level, you just get whatever that packet is, and you can stuff it straight into the packet serial transport. The packet serial encoding will encode it and get rid of any zeros in it, and then decoding at the other up on the RPi will reconstitute it, will decode it and reconstitute it into its original form. And at that point, then I might move it into some different kind of ROS message. I'm not sure yet. Did that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Well, I talked a whole lot, and I used up a whole lot of you guys' time, and I probably, like everyone's probably falling asleep by now, but that was what I had.
I found it very useful.
Yeah, it's nice to see. I've been, ever since I joined the group, I've been thinking about these multi-processor kind of systems and the kind of mechanics of getting this stuff from one to the other and then coordinating activities between them. So it's nice to see a what looks like a kind of, I'll call it professional approach here, right? Because you've got a careful control of the transport layer with this, what is it, COBS or whatever protocol?
Packet serial. Yeah.
Packet serial, and then you've got this mapping from collecting it down in the physical layer at the sensors, transport kind of safely guarded somehow UDP style, and then up in the autonomy layer, then you've got kind of standard messaging formats, because you can take LiDAR data from whatever vendor you want, Rigol or whatever, and
yeah,
and then you can just, as you say, compose. So it's kind of cool to see software's infrastructure in practice like this, right? Because you just
I can't claim credit for the invention. It's just copied from the guys at Lockheed who taught me all I know.
Well, you want a new idea reading an old book, right? But that's why we're here, right? So
but honestly, you guys have been just a wonderful boon in terms of different people in the group know different things and have good ideas, and I really appreciate. I've found.
So, Paul, are you going to keep us?
What? Yeah. Are you going to keep me is the question.
Oh, it's great having you. It's great having you in the group. You really bring a lot.
I think it does say something when it's what is it, 3.5, almost, I don't know, 3.5 hours in, and we still have 10 online here. So
yeah, that's pretty amazing.
It says something.
9.
You're getting ready to have 9, though.
It could be past some bedtimes.
I will
say, thank you
that,
guys for listening to me, for bearing with me while I did an extended session, but hopefully it's interesting. And if anyone wants, like guidance on or help on this kind of stuff, I'm more than willing to meet offline as well.
I always leave these with a whole bunch of new tabs, in my browser.
That's the trouble. All this does is add backlog, but it's good backlog, because sooner or later.
I keep getting further behind.
Well, I'll tell you what, this FreeRTOS on Arduino is pretty darn slick. It really is.
Very nice.
Especially integrated with code for VS Code for writing code and uploading it, building it, and everything. Platform IO. I mean, it's just slickest
Slick work.
things sliced bread.
Well, and also, Paul, you're like officially retired now. So the rest of us who have not reached that stage yet can always say, well, when I'm retired, I'll get a lot done too.
Yeah, and happily it's winter, so my wife isn't giving me too many jobs digging in the garden.
I see chuckles from Doug when I said that, so I'll tread cautiously.
Okay.
All right. Well, anyone else want to bring something up for the evening? Then I would move that we move along until next Tuesday night. So, guys, have a great evening, and send volunteers for presidential roles my way. And anyhow, we will chat next time. Take care. Good night.
Night, guys.